Chapter 762. As if to prove the words of the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles beast, the ninth heaven's holy sword in the distance suddenly shot out 3 glaring halos. Each one was stronger than the previous one, and each one was more terrifying than the previous one. The 3 halos overlapped and produced a terrifying power. Under this destructive power, everything in the surroundings trembled. The fog that lingered around the mountain stream was forcibly dispersed, and the surroundings became clear. Run! Without any communication or discussion, Lin Feng's group and the 2 spirits turned and fled. A Grade 1 artifact spirit was more powerful than the Miao Miao Saint King, the Fire Lake Saint King, and the other titled Saint Kings. With the strength of Lin Feng's group, it was impossible for them to defeat a Grade 1 artifact spirit. If they did not escape now, they would only end up dying tragically. Unfortunately, they realized it too late. The artifact spirit of the ninth heaven's sacred sword had already discovered their existence. "Since you're here, stay here." As a faint voice sounded, the surrounding space was immediately locked down by a powerful aura, causing the space to become like a swamp, trapping Lin Feng's group and making it difficult for them to move. Looking at the gradually clear figure, the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needle pine beast's eyes flashed with despair. It's over. At the top of the ninth heaven's sacred sword's hilt stood a figure. It was a middle-aged man who looked as if he would shatter at any time. His appearance was extremely ordinary, and his clothes were whiter than snow. He was so clean that he did not seem to belong to the mortal world. There was no expression on his face, and the aura on his body was also faint. There was nothing special about him, just like a mortal man. However, his deep eyes were like a black hole that contained endless violence. The so-called finishing touch was nothing more than this. That pair of pitch-black and deep eyes caused his entire body to become lively and no longer ordinary. He casually set up an aura to seal the space, causing Lin Feng's group to be unable to move. The figure slowly floated over, and the middle-aged man looked at the strange group in front of him with interest. A hint of surprise appeared on his expressionless face. 3 humans, a Grade 2 artifact spirit, and a Grade 2 medicine spirit. "I'm very curious, how did you all come together? If I tell you, will you let us go?" Lin Feng asked in a deep voice as he tried to calm down the shock in his heart. Even though he didn't know why Zhu Tian had suddenly become a Grade 1 artifact spirit, he still had to fight for a sliver of hope. Even if this sliver of hope was close to 0, he still wouldn't give up. He had given up too many times before he got the first space. After he got the first space, he swore that he would never give up so easily again. You think too much." Retracting his gaze from Lin Feng, the middle-aged man turned to look at the three-eyed wolf and the 10,000 needles burr beast and smiled. "I didn't expect that after so many years, the little wolf from back then had already become a level 2 weapon spirit." Looking at the middle-aged man with fear, the three-eyed giant wolf said in a deep voice, "I'm the one who didn't expect you to be promoted to a level 1 tool spirit. There are many things you didn't expect. Not only did I advance to a Grade 1 artifact spirit, I even devoured a Grade 1 artifact spirit." Ignoring the three-eyed giant wolf's surprise, the middle-aged man smiled and told the truth. His gaze fell on Lin Feng again, and the smile on his face turned into a teasing one. "Speaking of which, I have to thank you humans. It was a holy king among you humans who injured the Grade 1 artifact spirit, the heaven-devouring beast, and let it escape to this place. That gave me the opportunity to devour it." Hearing this, the three-eyed giant wolf's eyes widened. "Are you talking about the great battle 10 billion years ago?" Everyone in the fluorescent forest knew about the great battle 10 billion years ago. In that battle, nearly 1/10 of the fluorescent forest's area was destroyed. Many places were razed to the ground, forming an empty area. Until today, 10 billion years later, few people dared to set foot in that area for fear of being hurt by the remnant forces. All along, the artifact spirits and medicine spirits in the fluorescent forest thought that it was caused by a battle between two Grade 1 artifact spirits or medicine spirits passing by. That's right, it's that great battle. The middle-aged man was not surprised that the three-eyed giant wolf had guessed the answer so quickly. His eyebrows curled into a charming arc. It was because I devoured the heaven-devouring beast that I was able to advance to Grade 1 artifact spirit. Lin Feng, who was ignored, smiled bitterly. Only the Thunder Punishment Holy King and the Suiyang Holy King could injure a Grade 1 artifact spirit. Now, he had to bear the consequences of their actions. All right, I've told you so much. You can die in peace. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and smiled faintly. Hearing this, Lin Feng and the others' hearts skipped a beat. Wait. Under the middle-aged man's aura, Lin Feng spoke with difficulty. I'm a weapon refiner. I can refine innate spiritual treasures without artifact spirit. Perhaps you don't have to kill us. It's not a bad choice to cooperate. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really did not want to reveal his trump card. Driven by the hope of survival, the three-eyed giant wolf nodded repeatedly. Yes, 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 Lin Feng can refine innate spiritual treasures. Glancing at Lin Feng in surprise, the middle-aged man's eyes flashed with surprise. I've long heard that the blacksmiths in the outside world have magical means to refine weapons. I didn't expect to meet one today. I have to say, your suggestion is very tempting. The middle-aged man's lips curled into a mocking smile. However, I'm sorry, I choose to reject it. The last ray of hope in his heart was shattered. Lin Feng asked unwillingly, why? The middle-aged man shrugged nonchalantly. Because you humans are not trustworthy. This was a very simple but unexplainable reason. Lin Feng, let's run. The three-eyed giant wolf's eyes dimmed. He smiled bitterly and transmitted his voice to Lin Feng. It's my mistake this time. It's because of me that everyone is in danger. I should take responsibility. So, let me bring up the rear and buy you some time to escape. Almost at the same time, the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast's voice came. Lin Feng, the old wolf and I will stay behind. You guys run first. You. Lin Feng glanced at the three-eyed great wolf and 10,000 Needles Burr beast in shock. He never imagined that in such a hopeless situation, they would actually take the initiative to suggest that they stay behind and create an opportunity for the three of them to escape. This caused Lin Feng to be greatly shocked in his heart, and a trace of warmth and gratitude arose in his heart. One had to know that the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles thorn beast were the artifact spirits and medicine spirits of the desolate origin land. They only had a cooperative relationship with Lin Feng, but their actions allowed Lin Feng to see some of their virtues that were different from humans. Seeing Lin Feng not moving for a long time, the three-eyed giant wolf couldn't help but anxiously urge, "There's not much time left. Hurry up." Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing both looked at Lin Feng. With their understanding of Lin Feng, it wasn't difficult to guess Lin Feng's decision. This young man was someone who respected others 10 times over. He probably wouldn't abandon his companions and run away alone. As the two expected, Lin Feng, who slowly came back to his senses, revealed a smile on his face. It was a very happy smile. These days, it's always been the two of you performing. I rarely contributed. Now, it's time to show some of my skills. Turning his head to look at the two spirits, Lin Feng's emotions changed from the initial shock to being moved, then from being moved to calmness. His dark eyes flashed with a charming smile. If I don't have some ability, what qualifications do I have to cooperate with you? Hearing this, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing looked at each other and their eyes lit up. Don't tell me. Huang Wenbing looked at Lin Feng. Boss is going to use that move? It must be. Nodding affirmatively, Jing Ting couldn't help but look forward to it. From Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing's reaction, the three-eyed giant wolf could see some clues and couldn't help but be surprised. Don't tell me you have a trump card that can threaten a level 1 weapon spirit. Its words were mixed with a trace of doubt and doubt. That's impossible. Your strength is at most comparable to a level 3 weapon spirit. Lightly shaking its head, the 10,000 Needles beast obviously didn't believe it. Even if you have a trump card, I'm afraid it won't be a threat to Zhu Tian. It advised earnestly, Lin Feng, don't underestimate Zhu Tian. His strength is much more terrifying than you think. Although it had never fought with a level 1 weapon spirit, this didn't stop it from guessing the strength of a level 1 weapon spirit. Taking a deep breath, the 10,000 Needles beast said in a deep voice, Lin Feng, run away quickly. Don't worry about us. It didn't believe that Lin Feng could really fight against Zhu Tian because the difference in strength between the two was just too big. Looking at the 10,000 Needles beast, Lin Feng slowly shook his head. Sorry, although I, Lin Feng, am not a good person, but I don't have the habit of abandoning my companions and running away alone. Seeing that the 10,000 Needles beast still wanted to say something, Lin Feng simply spoke first. You don't have the responsibility to cover for us, and we don't have the right to abandon you. Otherwise, even if I escape, I, Lin Feng, will feel guilty for the rest of my life. At this time, Jing Ting also spoke. That's right, you don't have to persuade Lin Feng. If we live together. If we die together. After saying that, she looked at Lin Feng with a gentle gaze. Lin Feng, I will always support any decision you make. There's also me. Huang Wenbing laughed. Boss, I will always support you too. Looking at Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing in surprise, the 10,000 Needles beast was puzzled. Aren't you afraid of death? Huang Wenbing rolled his eyes at the 10,000 Needles beast's words. You know I'm a coward, yet you still ask. Are you deliberately trying to embarrass me? Although he said that, he still explained, Of course I'm afraid of death, I'm scared to death. But I believe in Boss. He won't let us die so easily. Even if we really die, I, Huang Wenbing, will accept it. To be able to die on the same day as Boss, isn't that a kind of happiness? You little brat, Lin Feng scolded with a smile on his face. Can you not make it sound so emotional? In the distance, the middle-aged man was already impatient. He frowned and said, Are you done yet? His voice brought everyone back to their senses. Are you done saying your last words? If you are, then prepare to go to hell. The middle-aged man's cold gaze fell on Lin Feng and the others. He looked at them as if he was looking at dead people. As a powerful level 1 artifact spirit, even if he was just a level 1 artifact spirit, he still had the right to be arrogant. In the entire desolate origin land, first-level weapon spirits were extremely rare, not to mention the fluorescent forest, which was at the edge of the desolate origin land. Here, he was invincible. He was the absolute overlord. Let alone a second-level weapon spirit and a second-level medicine spirit, let alone Lin Feng and the other Saint Kings who couldn't even compare to a titled Saint King. Even if he encountered thunder-punishing Saint King and Sui-Yang Saint King, he would still dare to fight them. Although he wasn't a match for them, he was confident that he could escape from them. Perhaps he did not even consider Lin Feng and the others as his opponents, because Lin Feng and the others were not qualified to be his opponent. I'll send you to a place first. When it's safe, I'll bring you out. Don't resist. With a solemn expression, Lin Feng transmitted his voice to Jing Ting and the others. These words were mainly for the 3-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles beast. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were already used to it, so there was no need for Lin Feng to remind them. As soon as he finished speaking, the 3-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles beast felt a mysterious force tugging at their bodies, as if it was trying to pull them away. Their survival instincts made them subconsciously resist this mysterious force. However, they suddenly remembered what Lin Feng had said earlier, so they dispersed their strength and allowed the mysterious force to work on them. Lin Feng, you must be careful. Before they disappeared, Jing Ting transmitted her voice to him. The disappearance of the three-eyed giant wolf and the others startled the middle-aged man. He frowned and asked, "Where did they go?" He looked around suspiciously and suddenly realized, it's actually a spatial treasure. His eyes were mixed with a trace of greed and desire. As a level 1 artifact spirit, he had powerful strength, but he did not have many tricks up his sleeve like a human saint king. Not to mention a space treasure, even a space ring was abnormally attractive to him. Looking at the middle-aged man calmly, Lin Feng said lightly, "There's no need to look for it. After I kill you, that space treasure will be mine." With a dangerous glint in his eyes, the middle-aged man narrowed his eyes into a slit. "Whatever trump card you have, just use it. I'd like to see what it is that gives you so much confidence that you dare to resist my will." Not interested in arguing with the middle-aged man, Lin Feng's face was solemn as he took a deep breath. In the next moment, he released his aura. The powerful aura instantly shattered the middle-aged man's aura, causing the lake below to boil. A huge whirlpool radiated out from the center of the lake. Around Lin Feng, a dense array of weapons had appeared out of nowhere. These weapons were all different in shape, and each one of them did not contain much power. Not to mention a first-grade innate spiritual treasure like the 9 Heavens Sacred Sword, even the third-grade innate spiritual treasure guarded by the three-eyed giant wolf was much more powerful than these weapons. However, there were too many weapons around Lin Feng, so many that it was frightening. More importantly, in the center of all these weapons, there was a top third-grade acquired spiritual treasure, the giant spirit divine hammer. What kind of skill is this? Frowning deeply, the middle-aged man felt the terrifying aura of nearly 3,000 weapons. His eyes suddenly shrank. How is this possible? Chapter 763. 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures were scattered all over the void of the 9th heaven cloud stream, releasing a burning brilliance. The light flashed like stars in the night sky. Wave after wave of powerful aura rolled out, causing the whirlpool on the lake to expand continuously. It looked like it was going to engulf the entire 9th heaven lake. The expression of the middle-aged man who was floating in the air kept changing. His deep and calm eyes were burning with a trace of fighting spirit. It had been 10 billion years since he had devoured a grade 1 artifact spirit. Since then, he had finally felt the threat of death. This was also the first time he felt the threat of death after becoming a grade 1 artifact spirit. "Is this your trump card?" The middle-aged man's gaze fell on Lin Feng, who was in the center of the 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures. His expression turned serious. Even though they were enemies, the middle-aged man still had a look of admiration on his face. A human sage king who was comparable to a grade 3 advanced artifact spirit had created a supreme technique that could threaten him. It was indeed unbelievable. The middle-aged man looked at Lin Feng quietly. He did not move because he knew that he had been locked on by Lin Feng's aura. Even if he escaped 1,000 miles away, he would not be able to escape from Lin Feng's attack. He had no other choice but to face Lin Feng's attack head-on. If it had been the Thunder Punishment Sage King or Suiyang Sage King, they might have been able to escape. However, the middle-aged man was only a grade 1 artifact spirit. His strength was much weaker than the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Suiyang Sage King. After all, the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Suiyang Sage King were comparable to grade 1 advanced artifact spirit. The middle-aged man could not compare to them. After a few breaths, the aura of the 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures reached its peak. Lin Feng, who was burning with a crazy fighting spirit, suddenly raised his head and looked at the middle-aged man. "Is it coming?" The middle-aged man took a deep breath. His expression was unprecedentedly serious. In the next moment, Lin Feng's eyes flashed. He said softly, "Explode." At that moment, the 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures released a blinding light. They were like 3,000 miniature suns, illuminating the entire fluorescent forest. When the light dimmed, a destructive force radiated out in all directions with Lin Feng's thin figure as the center. 9 swords of obliteration. At the moment when the 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures exploded, the middle-aged man's figure suddenly turned into a long sword that looked almost the same as the 9 heavens' holy sword. The only difference was that it was much smaller. The middle-aged man, who had transformed into a sword, caused the space to tremble. The destructive power contained within the sword caused the air to vibrate with a buzzing sound. Facing the terrifying impact of the explosion of the 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures, the sword that the middle-aged man had transformed into pierced towards the impact at a speed that was beyond Lin Feng's vision. Rumble. When the two destructive forces collided, they immediately created an even more terrifying destructive force. At this moment, the heavens and earth shook, the clouds dispersed, the lake water evaporated, the flowers and trees turned into dregs, and space trembled slightly. Everything in the world was overshadowed by this power. Time seemed to have frozen, and the scene in front of him became still. Crack! Along with a crisp sound, a crack appeared on the sword that the middle-aged man had transformed into. The frozen time and calm scene were also broken. The destructive force drowned the entire sword, and the remaining force did not diminish. Like a torrential flood, it swept out in a mighty manner. The 9th sky mountain, which had existed for 1 trillion years, suddenly collapsed with a deafening sound. It did not even survive the first wave of impact. Without the 9th sky mountain as a shield, the torrent of power seemed to have broken free from its shackles and drowned everything around it. Crack! At this moment, the sword that the middle-aged man had transformed into produced another crisp sound. Another crack appeared on the sword. Crack! 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 Dozens of cracks appeared on the sword in an instant. Some were wide while others were thin, and they covered the entire sword like a spider web. After enduring the impact of the destructive power once again, the long sword finally reached its limit and shattered with a loud bang. The shattered sword was annihilated in the void, turning into countless dregs. However, these dregs instantly reformed. The middle-aged man's figure replaced the shattered sword where it stood. Pft! With a sweet taste in his throat, the middle-aged man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His ruddy face gradually paled, and his ferocious aura dissipated by a lot. His entire person showed a sense of weakness. The middle-aged man calmly tidied up his clothes. His figure was like a wind pearl in a typhoon. No matter how the wind and rain swayed around him, it could not shake him at all. After tidying up his clothes, the middle-aged man indifferently raised his head. This movement once again triggered his injuries, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The bright red blood dyed the middle-aged man's clothes that he had just tidied up even redder. It was like the sunset. As if he did not notice his injuries, the middle-aged man's deep eyes were so calm that it was somewhat terrifying. He slowly raised his foot and stepped into the void. Step by step, the middle-aged man walked through the void towards Lin Feng. The violent energy in the surroundings was actually unable to stop him in the slightest. With every step he took, the energy in the surroundings weakened a little. When he was 30 meters away, the destructive energy in the surroundings had completely calmed down, and the scene in the surroundings rapidly became clear. However, when he saw the scene in front of him, the middle-aged man's eyes suddenly shrank. Dead! An inaudible murmur of doubt came out of the middle-aged man's mouth. His gaze fell on the void where Lin Feng was standing just now. Now there was no one there. There was nothing there. If I'm not wrong, he should be dead. Slowly lowering his head, the middle-aged man's lips curled into a trace of regret. It's too easy for him to die like this. In his imagination, It would be best to capture Lin Feng and interrogate him about the principle of Lin Feng's ultimate move. If he could master that move, he would not be afraid even if he faced a high-level weapon spirit. Just imagine, Lin Feng, whose strength was only at the level of a third-grade advanced artifact spirit, had relied on this move to forcibly cross several levels and severely injure a first-grade artifact spirit like him, almost killing him in an instant. His strength had increased by almost 100 times. If he were to use this move, how terrifying would its power be? This move made him begin to re-evaluate the law skill of a human Saint King. He did not dare to underestimate it anymore. However, it was a pity. After searching around for a while, the middle-aged man shook his head regretfully. How good would it be if he's not dead? This was the first time he had hoped that his enemy would survive a battle. Puff! As if he could not suppress the injuries in his body, the middle-aged man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His body fell from the void like a meteorite from outer space, crashing straight into the lake. Bang! With a splash of water several feet high, the middle-aged man's body sank to the bottom of the lake. After an unknown period of time, a disappointed and regretful voice came from the bottom of the lake. The middle-aged man's figure also rushed out from the bottom of the lake and floated in the void again. It seems that he's really dead. With a sigh, the middle-aged man wiped the bright red blood from the corner of his mouth. His pale face was gradually replaced by a rosy color. He had already tried his best to appear weak, but there was still no movement in the surroundings. This could prove that Lin Feng was really dead. If Lin Feng was not dead, how could he let go of such a good opportunity? Moreover, the destructive power just now had seriously injured him, a first-level artifact spirit, and almost killed him. With Lin Feng's strength, which was comparable to an advanced third-level artifact spirit, he would have been turned into ashes at the moment of the explosion. As the saying goes, if he's alive, you have to see the person. If he's dead, you have to see the corpse. With such an explosion, not to mention a corpse, even a piece of bone would not be left behind. After confirming that Lin Feng was dead, the middle-aged man suppressed the injuries in his body and controlled the endless earth and rocks to gather toward the collapsed Nine Heavens Mountain. In less than a quarter of an hour, the disappeared Nine Heavens Mountain appeared again. Even the dense trees and flowers, the turbulent river at the peak of the mountain, and the powerful waterfall with great impact were perfectly replicated. After doing all this, the middle-aged man's strength was greatly depleted. Stepping on the void, the middle-aged man's figure suddenly swept toward the Nine Heavens sacred sword, and finally disappeared into the sword body of the Nine Heavens sacred sword. The Nine Heavens sacred sword suddenly emitted a strong suction force. The energy between heaven and earth gathered from all directions and was refined and absorbed by the Nine Heavens sacred sword. The aura of the Nine Heavens sacred sword slowly recovered. The surrounding heaven and earth quieted down again. Endless water flowed down from the waterfall and hit the surface of the lake, splashing white water waves. The lake water flowed slowly along the low terrain. When it hit the rocks, it made a crisp tinkling sound, which was quite pleasant to the ear. The turbulent water flowed out from the mouth of the lake and into the stream, turning into a clear stream. It flowed all the way down, nourishing the entire fluorescent forest. After an unknown period of time, the clear water of the stream at the edge of the fluorescent forest suddenly trembled. In the next moment, a few figures appeared beside the stream out of thin air. Taking a closer look, it was the three-eyed giant wolf, the 10,000 needles spiky beast, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing. In the middle of the four was Lin Feng, who Jiu Tian thought had died. Successfully escaped? Looking in the direction of the Nine Heavens cloud stream in disbelief, the three-eyed giant wolf's lantern eyes were full of shock. A feeling of surviving a disaster quietly arose in the hearts of the few of them. A complicated look appeared in its eyes. The 10,000 needles spiky beast's gaze towards Lin Feng changed greatly. Even after a long time, its mind still remembered the scene that was like the end of the world. That scene brought it too much shock, so much so that it still had not recovered and its brain crashed. Looks like we should be safe now. Lin Feng secretly let out a sigh of relief as a hint of a smile appeared on his face. This sentence woke everyone up. The three-eyed giant wolf's reaction was the most intense. It was so excited that it jumped up and down. Its huge body shook the ground lightly, crushing dozens of ancient trees before it could barely vent a part of its excitement. After it stopped moving, it excitedly muttered, "We escaped from the hands of a level 1 weapon spirit, we escaped from a level 2 weapon spirit, a level 2 medicine spirit, 3 human saint kings comparable to level 3 weapon spirits, actually escaped from the hands of a level 1 weapon spirit. This was definitely the biggest miracle in the history of the Barren Land." Chapter 764. Seeing the three-eyed giant wolf's agitated appearance, Huang Wenbing could not help but roll his eyes. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Looking at the wolf, Jing Ting couldn't help but laugh at the wolf's comical behavior. They had experienced this kind of thing countless times. They couldn't remember how many times they had escaped from desperate situations. They also couldn't remember how many miracles Lin Feng had created. Anyway, they were used to it and didn't feel surprised. Maybe it was affected by Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing's calmness. The wolf's emotions calmed down a little. It asked curiously, "We escaped from the hands of a first-level spirit. Don't you feel excited?" "Excited, very excited," Huang Wenbing said expressionlessly. The wolf opened its mouth, but after a while, it curled its lips and said, "Too perfunctory." "Then what do you want me to do?" Huang Wenbing couldn't help but roll his eyes again. He said snappily, "When you stay with boss for a long time, you will find that this kind of thing is too common. You will get used to it soon." The silent 10,000 needles beast couldn't help but look at Lin Feng curiously. How many miracles had this calm young man created? How many secrets did he have? Everyone stopped for a moment. After everyone relaxed, Lin Feng clapped his hands and said with a smile. Everyone's eyes immediately gathered. Lin Feng said with a faint smile, "The matter of the 9 heavens has passed. Don't think about it for now. Our mission is the same as before. Old Wolf, Wan Song, you guys try to find some second-level spirit tools and medicine spirits and devour them. Ting Wenbing, you guys take advantage of this last period of time to cultivate and consolidate your current level. You guys can't get involved in the battle between second-level spirit tools and medicine spirit. It's better to use the rest of the time to cultivate." "Yes, boss." "Okay, Lin Feng." The few of them agreed one after another. "Everyone rest for another 2 hours. After 2 hours we will move out." Lin Feng lowered his head and thought for a while, then said, 2 hours should be enough for Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing to get some fresh air in the outside world." After the announcement, everyone was free to move about. Other than Jing Ting, who insisted on staying by Lin Feng's side, everyone else went to walk around and enjoy this rare moment of peace. Not long after, the three-eyed giant wolf squeezed through several ancient trees and walked out of the forest, returning to Lin Feng's side. "Lin Feng, there's something I want to discuss with you." The three-eyed wolf lowered its head in embarrassment. How could this guy be embarrassed? Looking at the huge figure in front of him in surprise, Lin Feng asked curiously, "What is it?" That's right. The three-eyed giant wolf hesitated for a long moment, but it was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Jing Ting blinked. She was even more curious about what the three-eyed giant wolf wanted to say. Sighing softly, Lin Feng said, "We are comrades who have fought together. Can you not treat me like an outsider?" After being provoked by Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf finally mustered up its courage. It raised its head and said, "If you have the chance next time, Can you help me and let me devour the 9 heavens? You are actually still thinking about devouring the 9 heavens. You are quite bold. Staring at the 3-eyed giant wolf with a faint smile, until the latter lowered its head in embarrassment, Lin Feng smiled and said, "If there really is a chance, it is not impossible." Hearing this, the 3-eyed giant wolf suddenly raised its head and looked at Lin Feng in surprise. "I can't promise you anything now. Let's wait for another 2 months." His eyes flashing with the light of thinking, Lin Feng pondered and said, 2 months later, if your strength can be raised to the peak of level 2 weapon spirit and level 2 medicine spirit, and I have not been teleported out of the desolate land, I will help you. Nearly 3,000 pseudo-spirit treasures had heavily damaged the 9 heavens. Lin Feng vaguely understood the limit of the 9 heavens' strength. As long as he had enough time, he was confident that he could kill it. "How long have you been in here?" The 3-eyed giant wolf could not help but ask with concern. Looking at the 3-eyed giant wolf strangely, Lin Feng did not know why it was so concerned about this question, but he still answered, "Since the day we entered the desolate land, almost 4 months have passed. According to the previous situation, we can stay in the desolate land for half a year to a year, but I am not sure how long we can stay in here." "Haha, that's great." Hearing Lin Feng say that only 4 months had passed, the 3-eyed giant wolf laughed excitedly. "4 months have passed, which means you can stay here for another 5 months. Hearing this, Lin Feng asked in surprise, "How do you know we can stay here for so long?" Like Lin Feng, Jing Ting was also puzzled. "It's very simple," the 3-eyed giant wolf said indifferently. "How long you can stay in the desolate land depends on the activity level of the law flares in the desolate land. This time, the activity level of the law flares in the desolate land is in the middle of the previous times, so you can only stay here for about 9 months. The activity level of the law flares? Jing Ting blinked her beautiful eyes and asked doubtfully. You can think of it as the intensity of the law fluctuations. Not knowing how to explain, the 3-eyed giant wolf could only say, the clearer and more intense the law fluctuations, the faster the law flares accumulated over 10 billion years will be released, and the greater the repulsive force the desolate land will have towards the outside world, so the time you can stay here will be shorter. By the same principle, the calmer the law fluctuations, the slower the law flares will be released, and the longer they will last. Although he did not completely understand, Lin Feng still vaguely understood a little. Are you sure it's 9 months? Lin Feng asked solemnly. Confidently meeting Lin Feng's gaze, the 3-eyed giant wolf said with absolute certainty, it's definitely 9 months. If you don't believe me, you can ask Wan Song. After confirming the specific time, Lin Feng could not help but breathe a sigh of relief, and the pressure on him was greatly reduced. This way, he could make many comprehensive plans and did not have to be afraid of the slightest thing. 5 months. In that case we can still do many things. Lin Feng was relieved, and the pressure on him suddenly disappeared. Whether it's you devouring the Grade 2 weapon spirits or Grade 2 medicine spirits, or Ting and Wenbing's cultivation, the time is completely enough. Not only that, I may also take the opportunity to cultivate. After staying in the desolate origin land for so long, he could vaguely sense that his comprehension of the laws had quietly improved, and the barrier between the laws of fusion and the laws of gravity had become much thinner. It was just that he hadn't cultivated in peace, so he didn't know how much he had gained this time. However, he was sure that as long as he cultivated in seclusion, his strength would definitely increase greatly. The accumulation and precipitation in the desolate land for nearly 4 months could not be underestimated. 2 hours passed quickly. After sending Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing to the Sword God's palace, Lin Feng warned the 3-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles beast, we still have 5 months, which is enough for you to devour many Grade 2 weapon spirits and Grade 2 medicine spirits. So, you'd better fight steadily and not provoke too strong opponent. Don't worry, Lin Feng. With this lesson, how dare we act recklessly? The three-eyed giant wolf nodded with lingering fear and said seriously, "I'll help you look after this stupid wolf. I guarantee that it won't act recklessly." The 10,000 needles beast also promised solemnly. The three-eyed giant wolf opened its bloody mouth and stared fiercely at the 10,000 needles beast. "If you talk nonsense again, I'll swallow you in one bite." The sharp thorn immediately trembled in fear. The 10,000 needles thorn beast complained pitifully, "Lin Feng, it threatened me. You guys." Shaking his head helplessly, Lin Feng sighed, "Anyway, be careful." After saying that, he flashed into the sword god's palace and disguised it as a strand of hair, blending into the three-eyed giant wolf's fur, and no one could see anything unusual. After the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles beast set off, Lin Feng entered the space number 1. This time, he had 2 tasks. One was to comprehend and integrate the power of law, and the other was to refine the pseudo-spiritual treasure and the acquired spiritual treasure. Number 1, keep an eye on the outside. If there's anything special, remember to remind me. Lin Feng told Number 1. After Number 1 agreed, Lin Feng sat down cross-legged and slowly closed his eyes. The accumulation of 4 months in the desolate land was fully released at this moment. Lin Feng's mind power, which was also his soul power, began to soar. A heavy aura spread out from Lin Feng's body, and the faint tiredness on his face disappeared. 50%, 60%, 65%, 70%. His comprehension of the law of gravity soared at an astonishing speed, as if it was going to reach the peak of complete mastery. His sparse soul power was also quietly increasing. In a short period of time, it had almost doubled, and it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed in the outside world. After half a month of comprehension, Lin Feng's comprehension of the law of gravity had reached 90%, but the speed gradually slowed down. Obviously, the accumulation of 4 months had been used up. If he wanted to continue to experience the feeling of rapidly increasing comprehension, he had to accumulate for a few more days. Moreover, he had a feeling that the last 10% of comprehension would be extremely difficult. Even with the enhancement of the desolate land, it would still take an unimaginable amount of time. Especially the last 0.1%, it would be the biggest and most difficult bottleneck he had encountered in his life. Slowly opening his eyes, a flash of light suddenly appeared in his dark pupils. "My power of law has almost doubled." Lin Feng could not help but be deeply shocked. "Just based on my power of law, the current me can fight against a half-king expert. One must know that before this, if he did not use the death god's will, he had to rely on a pseudo-spiritual treasure to fight against a half-king expert. The increase in power was extremely shocking. Just by increasing his comprehension of the law of gravity by a few %, his power had undergone a tremendous change. However, the increase in his power of law was still not the main point. What shocked him the most was that his soul power had increased threefold in this short half a month. His soul power had increased threefold, which meant that the power of his death god's will had also increased by several times. The combination of the law of strength and the death god's will had increased his power by several times. Even if he faced a powerful conferred Saint King, he could still put up some resistance. Even if he was still not a match for a conferred Saint King, he would not be a sitting duck anymore. In other words, if a conferred Saint King wanted to kill him, he would have to pay a price. Very good. A gleeful smile flashed in Lin Feng's eyes as he muttered, "I'm one step closer to Sui Yang's Saint King's power." Chapter 765. After 4 months of accumulation, Lin Feng's strength had risen to the level of a top-notch veteran Saint King. He was not far from the level of a titled Saint King. There were still more than 4 months left. Lin Feng estimated that before he left the desolate origin land, his strength would very likely reach the level of a titled Saint King. His gains in the desolate origin land had far exceeded his previous expectations. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Lin Feng shook his clothes, causing a cloud of dust to rise from his body. Let's try to fuse the power of laws. After thinking for a while, Lin Feng closed his eyes again. A long time ago, he had successfully fused 6 types of power of laws. Only the last one, the power of gravity, had yet to be fused. Although he knew that he would most likely not be able to fuse the power of gravity this time, Lin Feng still did not give up. The sharp increase in his soul power caused the time acceleration in the first space to increase as well. Originally, the time deficit was only 80,000 times. Now, it had increased to an astonishing 250,000 times. A day in the outside world was nearly 700 years in the first space. This kind of improvement allowed Lin Feng to have a few times more time. He could more easily refine pseudo-spiritual treasures and acquired spiritual treasures. After another 4 or 5 days had passed in the outside world, Lin Feng finally stopped fusing the power of laws. Just as he expected, before he comprehended the power of gravity to perfection, it was impossible for the power of gravity to be fused with the other 6 types of power of laws. The only thing he could do was to try his best to find the balance point of the 7 types of power of laws. Even if he did not find it in the end, he had taken a step forward. It would save him a lot of time when he needed to fuse the power of laws in the future. I don't know when I'll be able to master the 7 types of power of laws. Lin Feng sighed. Rice had to be eaten bite by bite, and the road had to be taken one step at a time. Lin Feng understood this principle. However, the current situation was extremely unfavorable to him. He naturally hoped to have the strength to fight Sui Yang Saint King as soon as possible. After a short moment, Lin Feng calmed his emotions, and his gaze became tranquil once more. It was time to refine pseudo and acquired spiritual treasures. Lin Feng cast his gaze towards a mountain not far away that was piled up by ancient trees. As he sensed the boundless willpower contained within, a glint flashed across his pitch-black eyes. Compared to his own strength, these ancient trees were his true reliance. He stretched out his hand and grabbed forward. An ancient tree at the foot of the mountain was immediately pulled over by a suction force. Lin Feng used his claws to cut off the branches of the ancient tree with his bare hands. Then, he threw the ancient tree to the side, leaving only the branches. Lin Feng did not forget that these branches also contained some willpower. They were even stronger than the artificial pseudo-spiritual treasure materials that he had made. The willpower contained in them was not something that artificial pseudo-spiritual treasure materials could compare with. With these branches, Lin Feng could directly refine pseudo-spiritual treasures without having to painstakingly create pseudo-spiritual treasure materials. Not only did it save a lot of trouble, it also saved a lot of time. However, it was a pity that the 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade materials that he had painstakingly collected from the 4 seas took him a lot of time. Now, it seemed that there was no place for them to be used. Shaking his head slightly, Lin Feng got rid of all the distracting thoughts. Then, he sent out a beam of fusion law energy and a beam of gravity law energy that he had comprehended to 90%, creating a virtual environment. Then, he threw a branch into it. Although it was a branch, it was not small. Its diameter was comparable to that of an ordinary tree. Repeating his previous actions, Lin Feng quickly threw 90 branches into the virtual environment simulated by the fusion law power and the gravity law power. Then, he performed time acceleration. After his soul power had increased by 3 times, he found that his control over the power of law had been greatly strengthened. In the past, he could only control 30 to 40 fusion law power and the gravity law power. Now, he could easily control 90 fusion law power and the gravity law power. he could refine 90 or even 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures at the same time. Just to be safe, Lin Feng limited the number to 90. Time passed quietly. Lin Feng repeated the stupid refining process. One pseudo-spiritual treasure after another was born from his hands. Later, Lin Feng became numb. Like a machine, he produced pseudo-spiritual treasures in an assembly line. Once, when he refined a pseudo-spiritual treasure, he was ecstatic. Even later, when he mastered the death god's will to refine pseudo-spiritual treasures in large quantities, he was still very satisfied. But now, seeing pseudo-spiritual treasures being born in his hands, he felt nothing. 10 days later, around Lin Feng, there were piles of pseudo-spiritual treasures. The number reached an astonishing 55,000. In a trance, his eyes inadvertently glanced at the pseudo-spiritual treasures that were densely placed around him. Lin Feng suddenly woke up and stopped what he was doing. 55,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures. Even with Lin Feng's extraordinary composure, he could not help but be shocked by the huge number. Taking a deep breath, Lin Feng smiled. With these 55,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures, he had the ability to fight against a titled Saint King. He even had the confidence to fight against Jiu Tian, a grade 1 weapon spirit. However, the more pseudo-spiritual treasures there were, the harder it was to control them. Lin Feng could only control the explosive power of 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures at the moment. If he exceeded this number, the explosive power of the pseudo-spiritual treasures would be out of his control. The explosive power would be enough to kill him 1,000 times over. Therefore, he was still no match for the Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King. Even if he relied on pseudo-spiritual treasures, he still could not defeat them. Moreover, the Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King were much stronger than him. They could instantly break free from his aura and will. As such, even if he detonated the pseudo-spiritual treasures, he would not be able to hurt the Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King. He knew very well that if he wanted to deal with the Sui Yang Saint King, he had to master the law of gravity and become a true Saint King. At that time, the Grim Reaper's will would be refined and become even stronger. Moreover, its power would multiply. Even someone as strong as the Sui Yang Saint King would not be able to break free from the Grim Reaper's will easily. After thinking through everything, Lin Feng took a deep breath and adjusted his emotions. After a while, he asked Number 1, "Number 1, how long has it been since I went into seclusion?" "Master, it has been 24 days. It hasn't even been a month." Lin Feng was surprised. He clenched his fists and felt the power in his body. He then looked at the pseudo-spiritual treasures around him. He was very satisfied with the results of his seclusion this time. The pseudo-spiritual treasures are almost done. It's time to refine the acquired spiritual treasures. Lin Feng's gaze gradually turned serious. He valued acquired spiritual treasures far more than pseudo-spiritual treasures. That thing was the most terrifying existence in the world. Judging from the power of the pseudo-spiritual treasures and the gigantic divine spirit hammer during the battle with Jiutian, the power of the gigantic divine spirit hammer was comparable to the power of 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures. It should be known that the gigantic divine spirit hammer was only a top third-rate acquired spiritual treasure. Above it, there were second-rate acquired spiritual treasures and even first-rate acquired spiritual treasures. This time, Lin Feng planned to try and see if he could refine a second-rate or even first-rate acquired spiritual treasure. If he could successfully refine it, it would be extremely beneficial to Lin Feng. Boom! After using the law of fusion and the law of gravity, Lin Feng took out an ancient tree that had already been stripped of its branches and leaves. It was an ancient tree with a diameter of 3 meters. He threw it accurately into the simulated environment. Then, Lin Feng used the law of time acceleration. Carefully observing the changes of the ancient tree, Linfeng's eyes flickered. It's working! Although the changes of the ancient tree were very slow, much slower than when Linfeng refined the gigantic divine spirit hammer, Linfeng still noticed the changes. As for whether it would be nurtured into a second-rate acquired spiritual treasure as Linfeng guessed, it was unknown. Almost all of his attention was focused on the ancient tree that was being nurtured. Linfeng felt inexplicably nervous and a little uneasy. Before the spiritual treasure was completely nurtured, Linfeng could not be sure whether it would be a third-rate acquired spiritual treasure or a second-rate acquired spiritual treasure. However, this result was extremely important to Linfeng. Linfeng could not afford to be careless. Time passed quietly. Day after day, year after year. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had passed in space number 1, and more than 4 days had passed in the outside world. Linfeng, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was covered with a thick layer of dust. Except for the occasional flash of light in his eyes, he looked no different from a human-shaped statue. He stared at the slowly changing ancient tree without blinking for 3,000 years. He did not even move his fingers. Suddenly, Linfeng's eyes shone brightly. His whole person seemed to have come alive like a statue. This was because the acquired spiritual treasure had reached the final stage of nurturing. Whether it succeeded or failed, the result would soon be revealed. Linfeng's breathing became a little heavier. His body trembled, and the dust dispersed and filled the air. Then, he slowly stood up and stared at the ancient tree that had turned into a bead. The bead began to tremble slightly. Although the trembling was small, it radiated a terrifying pressure. About another 2 hours later, the space suddenly shook. The power of the fusion law and the law of gravity were suddenly shattered. A bead emitting a blue light was about to break through the air. "Come back!" Linfeng suddenly shouted. He stomped his feet and his figure flashed quickly. He jumped into the void and grabbed the thumb-sized bead in his hand. As soon as his fingers touched the bead, a piece of information poured into Linfeng's mind. Would spiritual bead, second-rate acquired spiritual treasure. The next moment, the anxiety on Linfeng's face was swept away and replaced by ecstasy. It worked! Using the ancient tree that was more than 3 meters in diameter, Linfeng had successfully refined a second-rate acquired spiritual treasure, which was as powerful as a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. Did this mean that as long as he used the ancient tree that was more than 10 meters in diameter, there was hope to refine a first-rate acquired spiritual treasure? A scorching light suddenly flashed in his dark eyes. Linfeng's breathing became heavy. Chapter 766. Phew! Forcing himself to calm down, the joy in Linfeng's eyes disappeared in a flash and returned to calmness. Sitting cross-legged on the ground and slowly closing his eyes, Linfeng began to restore the power of laws. Through refining third-rate and second-rate acquired spiritual treasures, he discovered a pattern. The more powerful the acquired spiritual treasure, the more time it would take to refine the power of laws and gravity laws. It took him 3,000 years to refine the wood spirit orb, which was more than 10 times the time it took to refine the giant spirit divine hammer, and the power of laws consumed was also more than 10 times the latter. If he wanted to refine a first-rate acquired spiritual treasure, the power of laws and time he would need to spend would be a massive number. Before refining, he had to be fully prepared. 3 days later in Space 1, Linfeng opened his eyes. The power of laws in his body had been completely restored. Through meditation, his emotions had also returned to a tranquil state. Whether it was his mental state or physical state, they had both reached an unprecedented peak. It's about time to start. There was no fluctuation in his emotions. Linfeng seemed to be preparing to refine a pseudo-spiritual treasure, and there was no abnormality in his dark eyes. He chose an ancient tree with a diameter of 10 meters and cut off its branches. A majestic power of will spread out from the cut. He propped up the huge tree trunk with one finger, and the other hand unhurriedly struck out a rich fusion of the power of laws and gravity laws. He released his soul power and slowly controlled the power of laws to simulate changes, forming a virtual environment. His movements were very slow and meticulous, and he was fully focused, turning a deaf ear to the outside world. After an unknown period of time, he had almost reached his limit in simulating the power of laws into a virtual environment. He gently lifted the finger that propped up the huge tree trunk, and in the blink of an eye, the tree trunk pierced into the virtual environment like an arrow and stopped there. Lin Feng, who was extremely focused, stared at the tree trunk without moving his eyes at all, as if he was a stone statue. The impact of this refining was too great. Lin Feng did not dare to be careless. If his carelessness led to a failure, he would not be able to forgive himself. He did everything he could to the best of his ability. That way, even if he failed in the end, he would have no regret. After using time acceleration, his figure sat cross-legged below the two masses of rich power of law, quietly observing and waiting. Time passed in silence. Space number 1 was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The fusion of the power of laws and the power of the law of gravity slowly modified the ancient tree, making a barely audible sound, so that Space 1 would not be so dead silent. The two powers of laws shone like two suns, illuminating Space 1. 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years. The figure that sat cross-legged seemed to have truly transformed into a stone statue, and he actually didn't move at all. If it wasn't for the bright light that occasionally flashed in his eyes, he would probably be no different from a real stone statue. Outside, in a lush green canyon, a huge figure and a petite figure rushed out one after another. Taking a closer look, it was the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles burr beast. The three-eyed giant wolf, whose aura was so strong that it was difficult to restrain it, was not satisfied with its progress. 10,000 needles, it's been more than a month, and our strength has barely reached the middle of second class. Why don't we go find a more powerful weapon spirit or medicine spirit? It suggested expectantly. Don't give me that. Hearing the three-eyed giant wolf's rotten idea, the 10,000 needles burr beast rolled its eyes. If you want to go, go by yourself. I won't accompany you. Being rejected by the 10,000 needle pine beast, the three-eyed wolf rolled its eyes and chuckled. Lin Feng isn't here anyway. He won't know even if we sneak in and kill a couple of powerful treasure spirits or medicine spirit. Only heaven and earth, you and I know this. As long as we don't tell anyone, no one will know. Seeing that this guy was not giving up, the 10,000 needles burr beast warned, you better give up on this idea. Without waiting for the three-eyed giant wolf to speak, it added, don't forget how we fought against Jiutian. Opening its mouth, the three-eyed giant wolf's eyes flashed with a hint of fear. Although it had been a month, it still had lingering fears. Every time it thought about it, it would feel a burst of fear. What are you afraid of? We were just unlucky that time. The three-eyed giant wolf retorted, but did not mention the previous topic. In the past month, the two spirits had joined forces to kill more than 10 second-class weapon spirits and second-class medicine spirit. These second-class weapon spirits and second-class medicine spirits were all existences that had just entered second class. With the strength of the two spirits, they did not encounter any danger. Their strength had also increased by a lot, from second-class beginner to second-class intermediate. With our current strength, continuing to devour second-class weapon spirits and medicine spirits is getting worse and worse. The three-eyed giant wolf sighed. If this goes on, I don't know when we will be able to reach second-class advanced. The 10,000 needles burr beast had also considered this problem. It pondered and said, after a while, let's challenge the second-class weapon spirits and medicine spirits. After devouring some second-class weapon spirits and medicine spirits, they would have enough confidence. Even if they encountered an accident, they would not be as helpless as they were when they fought against Jiutian. However, the main reason was that there were not many second-class weapon spirits and medicine spirits left in this area. They had no choice. Great! With an excited roar, the three-eyed giant wolf's huge figure rushed forward and immediately broke dozens of ancient trees. Afraid that it would be too proud, the 10,000 Needles beast reminded, "Don't forget to help Lin Feng collect ancient trees with a diameter of more than 3 meters. Got it." The barren lands covered a large area. The three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles beast had been out for so long, but they had not encountered a single human Saint King or Mastiff King. It should be known that human Saint Kings and Mastiff Kings were extremely fast. Even if they were suppressed in the barren lands, they could still travel 10,000 meters in the blink of an eye. The Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King's speed was even more terrifying. They were at least 100 times faster than ordinary Saint Kings. However, even with such speed, they had not figured out the area of the barren lands. It was enough to imagine how vast it was. In the vast barren lands, the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles beast had a hard time encountering humans. While the two spirits were still running around according to the locations of the weapon spirits and medicine spirits in their memories, the ancient tree with a diameter of more than 10 meters in Space 1 had shrunk by more than 100 times. Judging from its blurry shape, this ancient tree could possibly grow into a spear. As time passed, the size of the ancient tree became smaller, as if it was being compressed by some mysterious force. The majestic willpower it contained was also completely restrained. It was compressed into a small volume. If it was suddenly released, its power would be even more terrifying. Lin Feng, who was sitting cross-legged below, was once again covered in a thick layer of dust. From the dust, one could vaguely feel the passage of time. In the blink of an eye, more than 10,000 years had passed in Space 1, and half a month had passed in the outside world. Unknowingly, the figure sitting cross-legged had quietly stood up. In his line of sight, the ancient tree that had completely transformed into a silver spear began to tremble gently. The entire space seemed to resonate with it and trembled gently in a small arc. The power of the fusion law and the law of gravity that surrounded the ancient tree were like two flames that had been magnified countless times. As the silver spear trembled, the two huge flames also swayed gently as if they would be extinguished at any time. The silver spear had reached the final stage of gestation. 1 day, 10 days, 100 days. As time passed, the brilliance released by the silver spear became more and more dazzling. The power it contained also became more and more terrifying. An extremely terrifying aura was emitted from the silver spear. About 3 years later, the silver spear suddenly trembled, and the two balls of law power were immediately shattered. Like flames being extinguished, a destructive power suddenly burst out from the silver spear. In front of this power, the entire Space 1 shook violently, like a small boat in a monstrous wave. One careless mistake, and it would be destroyed into pieces. Oh no! With a flash of horror in his eyes, Lin Feng quickly rushed over, held the spear tightly, and flashed out of Space 1. He left Sword God Palace and appeared in the outside world. A piece of information poured into his mind. Bright silver spear, a first-class acquired spiritual treasure. Before he could rejoice, Lin Feng's expression changed, and he suddenly tightened his grip on the spear. The bright silver spear shook violently in his hand, and a powerful force kept coming from the spear as if it wanted to break free from its shackles. At the same time, the terrifying power of the bright silver spear also formed a powerful storm around it. It broke the flowers and trees, rolled up the soil and gravel, and made the earth tremble slightly. Lin Feng. Seeing Lin Feng appear, the three-eyed giant wolf and the pinecone beast were about to smile, but then they suddenly changed their expressions. What is this thing? There was a look of horror in the eyes of the two spirits. There was no time to explain. Lin Feng released the death god's will and used all his strength to barely control the bright silver spear and not let it break free from his hand. It was indeed a first-class acquired spiritual treasure. Even if no one was controlling it, the powerful will it contained made Lin Feng so embarrassed. Rumble. In the sky above his head, layers of dark clouds quietly gathered together, and rolling thunder resounded through the world. Almost at the same time, many saint kings at different distances from Lin Feng raised their heads and looked in the direction of the sky above Lin Feng's head. The next moment, a huge force suddenly came from the body of the bright silver spear, shaking Lin Feng's hands, and he suddenly broke free. Whoosh! The bright silver spear rapidly shot into the air. At the same time, a devastating ripple of energy erupted from the spear. Although the ripple of energy could not harm people, nor could it cause any actual destruction, it was far more powerful than the commotion Jiutian had created back then. Moreover, it expanded in all directions as if there was no end to it. Lin Feng's expression changed. Oh no! According to the strength and range of this wave of power, it would probably alarm many Saint Kings and King Han. But he didn't know that the Saint Kings and King Hun had already noticed when the dark clouds appeared and the thunder resounded. It was just that the distance was a little far, and it would take some time for the Saint Kings and King Hun to get here. Chapter 767. Obviously, Lin Feng did not expect that the appearance of the bright silver spear would cause such a great impact. He was very anxious, but there was nothing he could do. He forced himself to calm down. The more dangerous the situation was, the more he needed to be calm. Being anxious alone would not solve the problem. Lin Feng took a few deep breaths. The anxiety on his face slowly faded, and it was replaced by calmness and calmness. Looking at the bright silver spear suspended in midair, he did not rush up to snatch it back. This was because the faint pressure coming from the black clouds made it hard for him to breathe. The power contained in the lightning was definitely not something he could withstand. He even suspected that even if the Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King were here, they would not dare to touch the black clouds. According to the current situation, the black clouds should be the thunder tribulation caused by the bright silver spear. Perhaps it had a more accurate name, weapon tribulation. Lin Feng had encountered such a situation countless times in the Xingfeng realm, so he had experience. Lin Feng could not help with the tribulation at all. He could only rely on the bright silver spear. If the bright silver spear passed the weapon tribulation, it would become a real first-class acquired spiritual treasure, comparable to a first-class innate spiritual treasure. If it could not pass the weapon tribulation, the bright silver spear would turn into ashes under the bombardment of the heavenly thunder and disappear between heaven and earth. It seems that the bright silver spear should have no problem passing the weapon tribulation. Lin Feng had always been very confident in the weapons he crafted. He would never doubt the quality of the weapons he crafted. Therefore, what Lin Feng needed to worry about now was not whether the bright silver spear could pass the weapon tribulation, but how long it would take for the surrounding Sage Kings and Sage Kings to arrive. If many Sage Kings and Sage Kings came, how would he deal with them? He did not mind exposing his refining ability, but he did not want others to know that he had a first-class innate spiritual treasure, nor did he want it to be snatched away. Before he had the ability to confront Sui Yang Sage King, he needed to lay low and not let Sui Yang Sage King fear him. After thinking for a while, Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and said, "Old Wolf, Wan Song, can you do me a favor?" "Hey, what are you talking about?" The three-eyed giant wolf was displeased. "If you have something to say, just say it." The 10,000 Needles Burr Beast nodded. "Lin Feng, just say it. We will definitely help you." Taking a deep breath, Lin Feng said to the two spirits, if a Saint King or Mastiff King comes, help me block them. It would be best if you do not expose my existence. Because everything happened too suddenly, he was completely unprepared. It was not wise to expose himself at this time. TSK, I thought it was something incredible. The three-eyed giant wolf promised, don't worry, as long as I'm not dead, no one can come within 10 miles of me. He still had this bit of confidence. Just do your best. Linfeng, who was relieved, could not help but remind them, among the human Saint Kings, there are 2 tyrannical existences that are comparable to the first-grade artifact spirits. There is also an expert like that among the Mastiff Kings. So, if you encounter them, don't worry about anything and run for your lives. Although the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles burr beast were powerful, they were only comparable to the Miao Miao Saint King, Huazhe Saint King, and a few other titled Saint Kings. If they were to face the Thunder Punishment Saint King or Sui Yang Sage King, they would not be a match. Seeing how serious Linfeng was, the 2 spirits also became serious and nodded. Okay. After instructing the 2 spirits, Linfeng looked at the bright silver spear in the air again, and smiled bitterly. If he had known that the bright silver spear would cause such a huge commotion, he would not have chosen to forge it rashly. This accident had disrupted his plan and forced him to change it. I hope that the old wolf and Wan Song can buy me some time, Linfeng prayed. Artifact Tribulation, oh Artifact Tribulation, I hope you won't last too long. As if it had sensed Linfeng's thoughts, a blinding light suddenly flashed in the dark clouds. In the next moment, a bolt of lightning that contained a tyrannical will struck down from the sky and arrived in the blink of an eye. Boom! When the lightning bolt struck the bright silver spear, the deafening sound of thunder could be heard. In the face of this destructive force, the space was distorted and Linfeng's vision was greatly affected. The body of the bright silver spear sank slightly and white electric light flashed everywhere, as if electricity was being conducted on the spear. It withstood it. A faint smile appeared on Linfeng's face. His guess was confirmed. However, he was not complacent because the artifact tribulation had just begun. According to his estimation, there should be at least 3 or even 9 heavenly thunders. Whether the bright silver spear could withstand until the end, he would only know after experiencing it. Staring at the bright silver spear in shock and curiosity, the three-eyed giant wolf smacked its lips and said, "What a terrifying spiritual treasure! It's more powerful than the 9th heaven's sacred sword." The thousand needles burr beast also expressed its opinion. I don't know if it's more powerful than the 9th heaven's sacred armor, but I'm sure it's a first-class acquired spiritual treasure. Slowly exhaling, Linfeng smiled and said, "Except for the fact that it doesn't have a first-level artifact spirit, it's no different from a first-level innate spiritual treasure." Hearing this, the thousand needles burr beast looked at the bright silver spear again, and said in surprise, "This is an acquired spiritual treasure?" Seeing Linfeng nodding, the thousand needles burr beast gasped. A first-level acquired spiritual treasure. Linfeng had refined a first-level acquired spiritual treasure. It should be known that this was a terrifying existence comparable to a first-level innate spiritual treasure. Staring at the bright silver spear for a while, the three-eyed giant wolf curled its lips and said, "Forget it, I'd better not look at it. Sooner or later, my body will evolve into a first-level innate spiritual treasure, and it will definitely be more powerful than this spear." After saying this, it turned its huge body and flew toward the void in the distance. "Thousand needles, I'll guard the east, and you go to the west. We'll each take care of 2 directions. Is that okay?" When the thousand needles burr beast wanted to answer, the three-eyed giant wolf had already disappeared into the sky. "You've already left. Why are you still asking me?" The thousand needles burr beast curled its lips and flew in the opposite direction, leaving behind a voice, "Linfeng, we'll go first." Watching the 2 spirits fly away, Linfeng's eyes suddenly brightened, and then he heard a roar again. Boom! The second heavenly thunder finally came down and struck the bright silver spear. Fortunately, although the bright silver spear's aura was weakened a little, other parts of it were not seriously damaged. The second one, I wonder how many more will come. With a touch of worry between his eyebrows, Lin Feng lowered his head. If there's really no other way, I'll have to give up the bright silver spear. This was the first level innate spiritual treasure he had refined, and he had spent a lot of effort on it. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really did not want the bright silver spear to fall into the hands of others. After another quarter of an hour, the third heavenly thunder came one after another. The distorted space made it difficult for Lin Feng to see the scene in the sky. In a place full of destructive power, he did not even dare to release his soul power, or he would be killed. Therefore, he could only wait silently. When the space in the sky was restored, the scene in the void finally became clear again. However, when he saw the black clouds clearly, Lin Feng could not help but feel his heart sink. It's really the ninefold thunder tribulation. At this moment, an aura approached from afar, and Lin Feng's expression changed. This was the aura of a human Saint King. He did not expect a Saint King to arrive so quickly. Fortunately, this human Saint King was only an ordinary Saint King, and his strength was only on par with Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing. The first Saint King is here, and the rest will be here soon. Lin Feng's heart was in his mouth, and he did not feel relieved because the human Saint King's strength was too low. Instead, he became more nervous. I hope the Thunder Punishment Saint King, Suiyang Saint King, and the Mastiff King called Yuan Kuei are not nearby. The barren source land was very big, and the probability of Suiyang Saint King and the rest being nearby was very low. Even if they were extremely fast, they might not be able to arrive here in such a short time. As for the rest of the Saint Kings, as long as they were not experts at the level of the 5 titled Saint Kings, the 3-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needle pine beast could be stopped. I'll leave it to you. Lin Feng's gaze swept across the east and west, and then he flashed into the Sword God's palace. In the distance, just as the human Saint King was about to continue approaching, he suddenly stopped and looked at the huge figure in the void in shock. Guardian Saint Beast. The 3-eyed giant wolf's huge figure and the aura it exuded made the human shudder involuntarily. A titled Saint King Guardian Saint Beast. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. In an instant, he broke out in a cold sweat, and he stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move. He was afraid that any movement he made would attract the 3-eyed giant wolf's frenzied attack. With his strength, he would not be able to withstand a single blow from the 3-eyed giant wolf. As time passed, the nearby Saint Kings and Mastiffs arrived one after another. In just a short while, the number of Saint Kings and Mastiffs had reached a huge number of 30. Among them, there were 17 Mastiffs and 13 Saint Kings, and most of them were ordinary Mastiffs and Mastiff. There were no top veteran Saint Kings or Mastiffs, but there were 2 veteran Saint Kings and 3 veteran Mastiff. With 30 of them working together, they were still not to be underestimated. However, in the face of 2 titled Saint King Guardian Saint Beasts, the 30 Saint Kings and Mastiffs did not act rashly. If they were to really fight, they were still far from being a match for them. Just one of the 2 Guardian Saint Beasts was enough to make them suffer, let alone 2 of them working together. All the Saint Kings and Mastiffs waited silently, and their eyes shone with desire and greed. They were sure that the thing that triggered the lightning tribulation was definitely an incredible treasure, and it was at least a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. Silently waiting, everyone held their breath and did not have any intention to make a move. They were waiting for another titled Saint King to arrive. As long as another titled Saint King arrived, they would have the courage to make a move. By then, the situation would be chaotic, and everyone would have the chance to obtain that treasure. Chapter 768. More and more people are coming. Lin Feng's heart sank to the bottom. The bright silver spear had only survived 3 heavenly lightnings, and the artifact tribulation was far from over. Judging by the current situation, more Saint Kings and King Hun would gather. What made Lin Feng feel slightly relieved was that up until now, no titled holy kings had appeared. Clenching his fists, Lin Feng looked at the bright silver spear in the sky and prayed, "Faster, faster." Time passed slowly. The dark clouds in the sky quietly accumulated power, as if they were going to destroy this peerless weapon that shouldn't have appeared in the world. When this force accumulated to its peak, an incomparably powerful aura suddenly descended upon them. Everything within 100 miles was within its range. Boom! A destructive power that caused the space to distort was transmitted through the blinding lightning. The space in the barren source was extremely sturdy. Even titled Saint Kings couldn't cause any damage to it, but in front of this destructive power, the space was like a sapling swaying in the wind and rain, about to shatter at any time. This was definitely a power comparable to the thunder-punishing Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King's full power attack, or even more terrifying. Boom! The incomparably valiant bright silver spear also trembled violently under this force. The surface of the spear emitted the crackling sound of electric current conduction. Fortunately, it survived in the end. After being struck by 4 heavenly lightnings, it seemed to have been refined. The density of the material was even higher, and the power it contained was even more terrifying. In the distance, all the Saint Kings within 100 miles were shocked by the power of the heavenly lightnings, and their eyes were filled with shock. Their restless hearts quickly calmed down. In front of such a terrifying artifact tribulation, they were extremely small, like a speck of dust in the universe, insignificant. It's definitely more than a second-rate connate spiritual treasure. This thought popped up in their minds without any reason. A second-rate connate spiritual treasure definitely wouldn't be able to create such a terrifying power. Thinking of this, their gazes became even more complicated. Not to mention that the 3-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000-needle pine beast were right in front of them. Even if no one was stopping them, they wouldn't dare to approach recklessly. They thirsted for treasures, but only if they could survive. After witnessing the terrifying heavenly thunder, they admitted that they were unable to contend against it. They could only wait quietly, wait for the artifact tribulation to end, and wait for the more powerful Saint King or Yu King to join in. Hiding in the Sword God Palace, Lin Feng observed the saint rulers in the distance. His eyes flickered with a dangerous light. He did not have a good impression of these Saint Kings. In fact, his disgust for them was even greater than his disgust for King Hun. However, he could not touch them for the time being, because they were still of some use and could restrain King Yu. Let's wait a little longer. When my comprehension of the law of gravity is complete, I might be able to possess strength that is on par with Saint King Sui Yang. Lin Feng's expression changed for a moment before he finally made up his mind. That power! Far away, a figure suddenly stopped and stared at the void in the distance, staring at the lightning that suddenly struck down. Other than the Thunder Punishment Sage King and the Sui Yang Sage King, this was the first time he had felt such power. It was a power that made him shudder. A strong desire flashed in his eyes, and the figure suddenly sped up. He was almost twice as fast as before. He was sure that the treasure that had caused such a phenomenon was definitely a first-tier innate spiritual treasure. Even if it was not a first-tier innate spiritual treasure, it would definitely be on par with it. On the other side, a figure also sped up and flew toward the bright silver spear. With such a treasure, I will have a chance to contend with the Thunder Punishment Sage King and the Sui Yang Sage King. His eyes were wide open and his face was flushed red. He couldn't suppress the excitement and agitation in his heart. Further away, the Sui Yang Sage King and the Thunder Punishment Sage King also sensed the heavenly thunder power, and they were both shocked. They had only rushed over out of curiosity, but their faces gradually turned solemn, and their speed suddenly increased. Ah, ah. Looks like I won't return empty-handed this time. The leader of the U-monster tribe, the most powerful King U, laughed loudly. When he finished laughing, his figure had already flown thousands of miles away, and in a few breaths, he disappeared into the sky. Basically, all the Saint Kings and Hustle Kings hurried over from every direction. They all had the same goal, which was to obtain a first-tier innate spiritual treasure or a treasure that was on par with it. Whoosh! Whoosh! Streaks of light flashed across the bright sky. Even though the light was bright, the streaks of light were still obvious. Rumble! The fifth heavenly thunder struck the bright silver spear under Linfeng's calm gaze. The space finally seemed to be unable to withstand the bombardment of this power, and it immediately collapsed, revealing an existence of nothingness. Behind the nothingness, streaks of light that contained mysterious power rushed out. The fluctuations of the laws in the vicinity suddenly became clearer, and the various laws were more active than before. Even across the Sword God Palace, Linfeng could still clearly feel the changes. Those streaks of light. Linfeng's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, and he could not help but become solemn. The arrival of the weapon tribulation seemed to have caused an unpredictable change in the barren source land. However, he did not know whether the change was good or bad for the time being. Many sage kings also felt the change, but they only had eyes for the first-tier innate spiritual treasure or the equivalent treasure. They did not pay much attention to the subtle changes around them. However, the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles beast were extremely shocked after seeing the streaks of light. Flare of the law. The two spirits were extremely shocked. The total number of flare of the law in the barren source land is rapidly increasing. The increase in the total number of flare of the law meant that the fluctuations of the laws were clearer. At the same time, it also meant that the human sage kings and King Yu could stay in the barren source land for a longer period of time. Why is this happening? The 10,000 needles beast frowned slightly, and a trace of doubt flashed across its brows. This situation has never happened before. The three-eyed giant wolf immediately transmitted a message to Linfeng. Linfeng, those streaks of light are flare of the law. Other than this sentence, it did not say anything else, because it believed that with Linfeng's intelligence, Linfeng would understand everything with just this sentence. Wait, an expert is here. The 10,000 needles beast suddenly transmitted a message. Linfeng did not have time to think and quickly asked, "How many people? What's their level?" For now, there's only one. His strength should be about the same as ours. It's a human-conferred Sage King. Compared to the Sage Kings and King Yu, the weapon spirits and herb spirits lacked many means. However, they had one advantage, and that was that their sensing range was extremely wide. Humans used psyche to sense their surroundings, while they used their aura. To them, the aura's effect was comparable to that of a Sage King's will. Oh no, he seems to have sensed my detection. The 10,000 needles beast's expression changed. Don't worry, Linfeng said calmly. A human-conferred Sage King is not a threat to you for now. After comforting the 10,000 needles beast, Linfeng ordered again, pay close attention to the surroundings. If an expert comes, you must inform me immediately. As if affected by Linfeng's calmness, the 10,000 needles beast also calmed down and said, okay. Inside the Sword God's palace, rubbing his temples, Linfeng smiled bitterly. He did not expect that a conferred Sage King would come so quickly. This was not good news. With the first, there would be a second. It would not be long before the rest of the conferred Sage Kings, as well as the King Yu, who was comparable to a conferred Sage King, arrived. Looking at the bright silver spear hanging in the air, Linfeng felt that time was running out. Judging by the speed at which the Saint Kings and the Mastiffs were rushing over, it would not take long for them to gather here. After an unknown period of time, the sixth lightning bolt slowly descended. Whether it was Linfeng, the three-eyed giant wolf, the 10,000 needles beast, or the human sage kings and King Yu, all of their gazes were focused on the bright silver spear hanging in the air. The spatial crack was widened, and a large number of law flares flew out, causing the law flares in the desolate origin land to become even denser. The power contained within the lightning bolts also became more and more terrifying. I survived it. Linfeng heaved a sigh of relief. Although he was very confident in the weapon he forged, he would only know if it could survive the artifact tribulation after experiencing it. Just as Linfeng heaved a sigh of relief, the 10,000 needles beast exclaimed, "Linfeng, another expert is here." Its voice was somewhat nervous. "Another conferred Sage King expert, but this time it is the King Yu." 2 conferred Sage Kings and dozens of Sage Kings and King Yu were enough to pose a threat to the two spirits. Subconsciously clenching his fist, Linfeng took a deep breath and solemnly transmitted his voice, "Hold on a little longer." Looking at the bright silver spear in the air, Linfeng was unwilling to give up. If he encountered a true first-rate innate spiritual treasure, he could easily choose to give it up. But the bright silver spear was something he had spent millions of sleepless days and a great deal of effort to forge with his own hands. It was originally his private property, but now it was being fought over by others. How could he be willing to give up? The bright silver spear meant a lot to him. After receiving Linfeng's voice transmission, the 10,000 needles beast and three-eyed giant wolf were already thinking of retreating, but they still persevered and continued to guard the place. As long as Linfeng did not say anything, they would not take a step back. Moreover, 2 conferred Sage Kings were not enough to scare them off. In the middle of a forest in the Sword God's palace, Huang Wenbing suddenly felt that his cultivation speed had greatly increased, and he immediately became more immersed in his cultivation. In a small, remote courtyard, Jing Ting opened her eyes in puzzlement. Then, she focused even more on her cultivation. The two of them did not know that a crisis was slowly approaching them. Chapter 769. There was a certain pattern to the timing of the lightning strike. The first 3 bolts of lightning would strike every 15 minutes. The middle 3 bolts of lightning would strike every 30 minutes. According to this pattern, the last 3 bolts of lightning would strike every 30 minutes. It was twice as long. According to this pattern, the last 3 bolts of lightning would strike every 30 minutes. In other words, it was very likely that the weapon tribulation would only end after 5 hours. If it were any other time, 5 hours would be nothing. It would pass in the blink of an eye. But at this moment every second felt as long as a century. The people nearby held their breaths, not daring to make the slightest sound. Apart from the rumbling lightning in the dark clouds, no other sound could be heard. Suiyang Holy King, Thunder Punishment Holy King, and Yuan Kuei, the 3 top experts, needed a lot of time to arrive because they were too far away. After all, they were extremely fast. In order to find first-rate connate spiritual treasures or treasures that were on par with them, they had already flown very far away. It would also take a lot of time for them to return. When the 7th bolt of lightning struck, the people nearby looked even more solemn. The slight aura that leaked out sent chills down everyone's spines. Compared to the middle 3 bolts of lightning, the power of the 7th bolt of lightning had risen to another level. Under such power, even Suiyang Holy King would not dare to get close. This was a power that was enough to destroy experts like Suiyang Holy King, Thunder Punishment Holy King, and Yuan Kuei. Boom! In an instant, the world shook and a blinding light lit up the sky. A large number of law flares emerged from the collapsed space and were born in the void. They were active in the barren land. Oh my God, Linfeng is making too much of a commotion. The 3-eyed giant wolf secretly swallowed and glanced in the direction of the bright silver spear. Unfortunately, even after releasing such a terrifying bolt of lightning, the dark cloud in the void still did not dissipate. It was accumulating an even more terrifying power at an astonishing speed. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth was surging towards it endlessly, like a whale sucking in water. It was forcibly sucked into the black cloud, causing the aura of the rolling thunder and lightning within it to grow rapidly. Before the 8th bolt of lightning struck, Lin Feng received a telepathic message from the 10,000 Needles beast. Lin Feng, another one is here. Although it was not very clear, Lin Feng understood what it meant. Another conferred Holy King expert had arrived. That's 3. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed as he felt the pressure on him increase. The 3-eyed giant wolf and 10,000 needle pine beast were no longer able to deal with 3 conferred Holy Kings. After a moment of silence, Lin Feng took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. He couldn't panic. The more important it was at a time like this, the more he needed to stay calm. Don't move for now. After hesitating for a moment, Lin Feng transmitted his voice to the 2 spirits. The weapon tribulation is about to end. Once it ends, I will take the bright silver spear away. You only need to block them for 3 breaths of time. Leave the rest to me. As soon as Zhang Xian finished his telepathic message, a terrifying bolt of lightning descended from the sky. Boom! The bright silver spear was smashed into the ground by several tens of feet. The spear body's radiance dimmed a little, giving people a sense of weakness. Lin Feng's pupils suddenly shrank as he clenched his fists. You must hold on. If the bright silver spear could not withstand the last bolt of lightning, all their previous efforts would be in vain. The surrounding Holy Kings and Mastiff Kings remained silent as they waited for the last bolt of lightning to descend. Their restless hearts began to stir again. They rubbed their shoulders as they waited for the weapon tribulation to end. Then, they would all rush forward to fight for this first-grade innate spiritual treasure that had caused a huge commotion. If they still did not know that this was a first-grade innate spiritual treasure by now, they should just bang their heads against the wall and die. The 2 human-conferred Holy Kings and the Mastiff King all had a look of desire in their eyes. They had already secretly taken out their weapons and were waiting for the weapon tribulation to end. Seeing the Holy Kings and Mastiff King's silent actions, the 3-eyed giant wolf and 10,000 needle pine beast were secretly on their guard, ready for the final battle. Seconds and minutes passed. The surroundings fell into a dead silence. Everyone could hear the sound of their own hearts beating. Suddenly, the 10,000 needle pine beast exclaimed, "Oh no, a super expert is here." At the same time, the 3-eyed giant wolf's expression changed drastically. Sui Yang Holy King, the most powerful Holy King among the human Holy Kings. Although there were many Holy Kings among the human Holy Kings, Sui Yang Holy King was undoubtedly one of the most powerful Holy Kings. Even among the weapon spirits and medicine spirits, Sui Yang Holy King was very famous. In terms of reputation, even the mysterious and powerful Thunder Punishment Holy King could not compare to Sui Yang Holy King. This was because Sui Yang Holy King was the one who had killed the weapon spirits back then. He was extremely famous among the weapon spirits and medicine spirits, and he was also extremely ferocious. "Quick, Lin Feng, run!" the 3-eyed giant wolf said in a trembling voice. Sui Yang Holy King was a super expert who was much more powerful than Jiutian. He was comparable to an advanced grade 1 weapon spirit. In the face of such an existence, neither the 3-eyed giant wolf nor the 10,000 needle pine beast had the courage to resist. They could not even defeat Jiutian, let alone this ferocious existence who could easily kill Jiutian. Hearing the voice transmission of the 2 spirits, Lin Feng's expression could not help but change drastically. At this critical moment, Sui Yang Holy King had arrived. Is this the will of the heavens? Lin Feng gritted his teeth, his expression extremely ugly. No, I can't panic. Forcing himself to calm down, Lin Feng quickly thought of a solution. Everyone wants a first-rate innate spiritual treasure. Even if Sui Yang Holy King is extremely powerful, the other holy kings might not be willing to give it up. In front of a treasure, not many people could maintain their rationality. Maybe I can create a little chaos and take the opportunity to escape. Linfeng, who had calmed down, asked through voice transmission, "Has he arrived?" The 10,000 needle pine beast replied, "Not yet, but he will be here in 15 minutes at most." 15 minutes. Linfeng silently heaved a sigh of relief. The last heavenly thunder should fall in half an hour. In other words, the weapon tribulation would end in half an hour. With half an hour to relax, Linfeng could calmly make arrangements. In the distance, a middle-aged man in a golden silk robe swept across the void with a smile. A level 2 artifact spirit and a level 2 medicine spirit. Haha, interesting. Unlike the other holy kings and mastiff kings, Sui Yang Holy King, who had been dominating since ancient times, was very familiar with artifact spirits and medicine spirits. His gaze fell on the bright silver spear below the dark clouds, and the light in his eyes became brighter. A first-rate innate spiritual treasure, just as I expected. This treasure is reserved for me. Sui Yang Holy King's tone was mixed with a hint of dominance as he smiled faintly. Soon, half an hour passed. The 9th heavenly thunder fell, just as Linfeng expected. Boom! As the heavenly thunder struck the bright silver spear, the dark clouds in the sky slowly dissipated. Crack! A crisp sound came from the body of the bright silver spear, and immediately, dozens of tiny cracks appeared. This scene made everyone's expression change greatly. If the bright silver spear was destroyed, then they would not be able to obtain anything. Even though the bright silver spear was still unknown to who would obtain it, everyone silently prayed in their hearts, "Please don't destroy it." As long as the bright silver spear was not destroyed, they still had a chance. If the bright silver spear was destroyed, then all their efforts would be in vain. In the next moment, a bright light burst from the bright silver spear, and it was so dazzling that everyone could not help but close their eyes. The dozens of cracks were instantly repaired by a mysterious force. Immediately after, an earth-shattering destructive force radiated in all directions, as if it was proudly announcing its existence to everyone. "Stop them!" Linfeng, who had come back to his senses, roared as he transmitted his voice. Looking at the holy kings and mastiff kings who were ready to make a move, a hint of determination flashed in their eyes. "Attack!" One of the titled holy kings, the War Holy King, roared and led the charge. Once the War Holy King made his move, everyone could not wait any longer. Almost all of them attacked at the same time, using their own unique skills and attacking the two spirits with all their might. Linfeng, who was closest to the bright silver spear, drove the sword god's palace and arrived in the blink of an eye. "Come in." Linfeng, who was already prepared, reached out his hand and grabbed the bright silver spear with lightning speed. Once he grabbed the bright silver spear, Linfeng could not wait to send a message to the two spirits, "Old Wolf, 1,000 pine needles, retreat." After receiving Linfeng's message, the three-eyed giant wolf and 1,000 pine needles both heaved a sigh of relief and retreated as they fought. Taking advantage of the gap in the battle, they took the attacks of a few ordinary holy kings head-on and quickly fled. Their actions immediately alerted the many holy kings. The War Holy King's expression changed. The first-class innate spiritual treasure is gone. Chase. The rest of the holy kings and mastiff kings did not say anything. They quickly increased their speed to the maximum and chased after the two spirit. In the distance, Saint King Suiyang had originally rushed over leisurely, but the sudden disappearance of the bright silver spear caused his expression to suddenly turn cold, and a wisp of shocking coldness flashed through his eyes. Someone actually dared to steal the first-rate natural spirit treasure that I've reserved a long time ago. That originally incomparably terrifying speed had actually doubled from its original foundation. In an instant, his figure overlapped, and when he reappeared, he was already behind the many holy kings and mastiff kings. Suiyang Holy King's speed has doubled. The 1,000 pine needles sucked in a breath of cold air and immediately sent a message to Lin Feng. He will catch up with us in at most a few dozen breaths. The three-eyed giant wolf, who had always been carefree, could not help but feel his eyelids twitch. Lin Feng's pitch-black eyes flickered with astonishment. So fast! However, the situation was urgent and he could not think too much. He gritted his teeth and said, "Come over first. Let's talk after entering the Sword God's palace." As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly took out the second-class acquired spiritual treasure, the wood spiritual orb, that he had just refined. He carved an ancient tree into the shape of a long spear and then stuffed the wood spiritual orb into the body of the long spear. He took a deep breath and controlled the Sword God's palace to open an exit. He held the non-elemental long spear tightly and was always ready. When the two spirits were near the Sword God's palace, Lin Feng quickly sent them into the Sword God's palace. Then, he used all his strength to throw the long spear in his hand into the sky. Swoosh! The long spear streaked across the sky and disappeared into the sky. First class acquired spiritual treasure. The three-eyed giant wolf and the 1,000 pine needles beast looked at Lin Feng in shock. Lin Feng did not have time to explain. He controlled the Sword God's palace and turned into a speck of light to escape quickly. Many holy kings and mastiff kings changed their direction and flew up into the sky. At this moment, Suiyang Holy King suddenly arrived. Don't be fooled. The first-class innate spiritual treasure has been replaced. The real first-class innate spiritual treasure has been taken away with a space treasure. With a faint smile, Suiyang Holy King's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings. Ha, found it! A vast and powerful will burst out like a tide and instantly locked onto the speck of light that the Sword God's palace had turned into. The Sword God's palace, which was flying away quickly, seemed to have fallen into a quagmire and could not struggle. Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf, and the 1,000 pine needles beast narrowed their eyes. At this moment, everyone's hair stood on end. Chapter 770. Lin Feng, let us out. We'll fight it out with Suiyang Sage King. A vicious light flashed across the wolf's eyes as it yelled at Lin Feng. There were two kinds of people in the world. One kind of people would collapse when pushed to the limit, and the other kind of people would throw caution to the wind when pushed to the limit, stubbornly resisting until the end. The three-eyed giant wolf belonged to the latter. Fight? How? Lin Feng, who had a bitter smile on his face, asked, "Don't forget that Suiyang Sage King is much more powerful than Jiutian. Do you think you're stronger than Jiutian? If Suiyang Sage King fought Jiutian, Jiutian would not last more than 10 moves. The difference between the two was too great. It was like the difference between a top veteran Sage King and a titled Sage King. Although Suiyang Saint King was also a titled Saint King, he was hundreds of times stronger than Miao Miao Saint King, Huazhe Saint King, War Saint King, and the other titled Saint Kings. They were not even on the same level. If Suiyang Saint King wanted to kill Miao Miao Saint King and the others, he would only need one move. Hearing this, the three-eyed giant wolf fell silent. Even Jiutian was no match for Suiyang Sage King. As a loser, it was no match for Suiyang Sage King. If Lin Feng really listened to it and sent it out with the 10,000 needles beast, he would probably be killed by Suiyang Saint King in a single move. But if we don't do that, what else can we do? The three-eyed giant wolf gritted its teeth and said in a low voice, "Are we just going to wait for death?" The 10,000 needles beast's eyes dimmed as a hint of gloominess flashed across its eyes. There was nothing they could do other than wait for death. At this moment, Suiyang Sage King's voice came from outside. There was a hint of mockery in his voice. "Do you want to come out yourselves, or do you want me to force you out?" Lin Feng. The three-eyed giant wolf's hair stood on end. "Let us out. It would rather die in a fair battle with Suiyang Saint King than hide in the Sword God's palace." Moreover, even if it hid here, it wouldn't be able to escape the calamity sooner or later. Since the outcome was already decided, it might as well fight vigorously and not waste its time in this world. Don't be impulsive. Taking a deep breath, Lin Feng was incomparably calm. His pitch-black eyes flashed with a bright light. We might still have a chance to survive. Hearing Lin Feng's words, the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000-needle pine thorn beast involuntarily looked at each other. The latter asked hesitantly, "Are you going to use the move you used to deal with Jiu Tian?" Lin Feng did not intend to hide his thoughts. He nodded slightly and said, "That's right. But that move couldn't even kill Jiu Tian. Saint King Sui Yang is much stronger than Jiu Tian." Frowning, the three-eyed wolf said doubtfully, "It's not that I don't trust you, but Lin Feng, I'm afraid this move won't work. There's no time to explain now. In short, if you trust me, don't be rash. There's still hope. Moreover, I won't joke about my own life," Lin Feng said seriously as he looked at the two spirits solemnly. "Then all right." The three-eyed giant wolf hesitated for a moment before it finally nodded. "I hope this move will really work." In fact, they had no other choice but to use this method. Outside, Lord Sui Yang. The human Saint Kings flew over from afar. Although they were very respectful on the surface, their hearts were heavy. Sui Yang Saint King's arrival had undoubtedly reduced their chances of obtaining a first-rate innate spiritual treasure to the extreme. It was close to zero. In front of the almost invincible Sui Yang Saint King, they had no confidence in obtaining a first-rate innate spiritual treasure. Unless the Thunder Punishment Saint King or Yuan Kuei were here to restrain Sui Yang Saint King, they might still have a chance. However, now that Sui Yang Saint King was alone, they had no chance at all. Everyone's restless hearts calmed down when sacred ruler Sui Yang showed up. The War Saint King and the Earth-titled Saint King also nodded at Sui Yang Saint King. Sui Yang. The Saint Kings looked at the human Saint King warily, not daring to act rashly. Sui Yang Saint King nodded at the Saint Kings and looked at the spot of light where the Sword God's palace had turned into. After a pause, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Oh right, the thing that the other party threw out should be a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. If you're interested, you can go take a look." Second-rate innate spiritual treasure. The Saint Kings and Saint Kings all looked at Sui Yang Saint King in unison. Sui Yang Saint King glanced at the crowd and smiled faintly. "I have to say that the other party is very generous. In order to divert your attention, he actually used a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. Unfortunately, he underestimated my judgment. How could such a scheme fool me? You're a great schemer. Who can fool you?" Of course, no one dared to say this out loud. However, everyone's attention was successfully diverted by Sui Yang Saint King to the second-rate innate spiritual treasure. Everyone had their own plans. Since Sui Yang Saint King was here, there was almost no chance for them to obtain the first-rate innate spiritual treasure. In that case, it might be a good choice to fight for the second-rate innate spiritual treasure. Compared to the first-rate innate spiritual treasure, the second-rate innate spiritual treasure was much weaker. However, the chances of the Saint Kings and Saint Kings obtaining it had increased by a lot. For a moment, everyone looked up at the sky quietly. They were tempted, but no one acted immediately. They seemed to be hesitating, and no one seemed to want to be the first to act. Seeing that no one moved, Sui Yang Saint King continued to add fuel to the fire. He said unhurriedly, "By the way, I met Miao Miao Saint King and the others on my way here. They should be here soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the Saint Kings and Saint Kings moved together and flew up into the sky almost at the same time. Sui Yang Saint King smiled and narrowed his eyes into slits. He said lightly, "At least you know what's good for you. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind killing all of you." He still remembered the first time he fought for the first-rate innate spiritual treasure. Many Saint Kings had died at his hands. It was also that battle that established his position as the king of all realms. What a smart guy! Lin Feng, who was hiding in the Sword God Palace, could not help but be secretly shocked. Sui-Yang Saint King's move was too beautiful. Send away the miscellaneous people so that he doesn't have to worry about any accidents. This was an extremely powerful and cunning opponent. Obviously, Sui-Yang Saint King was not an ordinary person to be able to stand at the top of all realms for 1,000,000,000 years. Alright, the irrelevant people are gone. Next, I can focus on dealing with you. Sui-Yang Saint King smiled faintly. No matter who you are, you'd better hand over the first-rate innate spiritual treasure. Then, I might consider sparing your life. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. I've given you a chance. Although Lin Feng did not show up, Sui-Yang Saint King was sure that the person hiding in the space treasure was a human Saint King. This was because other than a human Saint King, no one could create or control the space treasure. King Hun could not do it, and neither could Weapon Spirits and Elixir Spirit. This was a technique unique to human Saint Kings. However, Sui-Yang Saint King had not figured out Lin Feng's identity yet. He only knew that the person with the space treasure was definitely not on his side. Otherwise, he would not have hidden until now. Lin Feng did not speak as he looked at Sui-Yang Saint King, who was standing calmly in the void. Instead, he looked solemn and took a deep breath. It seemed that the battle with Sui-Yang Saint King was unavoidable. Let me have a taste of your strength first. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and took out 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures. His aura rose as if it was going to increase endlessly. Although the Sword God's palace was separated, Sui-Yang Saint King, who was in the void, still felt a sense of danger. Frowning slightly, Sui-Yang Saint King's expression changed slightly. When did such a powerful Saint King appear among the human Saint Kings? Up until now, the only Saint King who could make him feel this way was the Thunder Punishment Saint King. Could there be another one now? Could it be the Thunder Punishment Saint? As soon as this thought appeared, Sui-Yang Saint King shook his head and denied his guess. If it's really him, he would not be so secretive. In terms of strength, the Thunder Punishment Saint King wasn't any weaker than him. Even though he had refined another Saint Monarch fruit, he still couldn't suppress the Thunder Punishment Saint King in terms of strength. At their level, a single Saint Monarch fruit could no longer increase their strength substantially. Sui-Yang Saint King looked at the light spot with a hint of doubt. He gradually became solemn. Although he had absolute confidence in his own strength, the sudden appearance of this mysterious expert still made him a little wary. It was better to be safe than sorry. Although Sui-Yang Saint King did not have a good grasp of human nature, his wisdom was not something an ordinary person could compare to. Suddenly, Sui-Yang Saint King's eyes suddenly narrowed. His gaze, which was fixed on the light spot, instantly became solemn and his eyes narrowed slightly. Unknowingly, 10,000 weapons had appeared around the light spot. The energy contained in these weapons was not even comparable to that of a third-rate innate spiritual treasure. However, each weapon contained a trace of power similar to that of an innate spiritual treasure. The 10,000 weapons were arranged in different angles and positions, forming an extremely mysterious connection. They worked together, causing their power to stack together. My intuition was right. Sui-Yang Saint King's eyes flashed with a trace of fear. This is definitely an expert that cannot be underestimated. Although the opponent's strength seemed to be slightly weaker than his, the Thunder Punishment Saint King, and Yuan Kuei, he was definitely at their level. His eyes flashed with a dangerous light, and a trace of killing intent secretly grew. Kill him! Without any hesitation, Sui-Yang Saint King made this decision in his heart. The Thunder Punishment Saint King was already a headache for him. He did not want another Saint King like him to appear among the humans. Chapter 771. Strictly speaking, The Thunder Punishment Saint King had become famous earlier than Sui-Yang Saint King. He was the first to become a top-notch titled Saint King. Therefore, Sui-Yang Saint King could only watch as the Thunder Punishment Saint King grew into a towering tree. However, the mysterious person in front of him was different. Although the mysterious person was strong, Sui-Yang Saint King was confident that he could defeat or even kill him. This was not arrogance, but confidence in his own strength. He did not want a second Thunder Punishment Saint King to appear in the world. One was enough. Even two would be too much. His overbearing desire for control had destined him to be the enemy of the mysterious person. It seems that I have not been vigilant enough all these years. After getting rid of Lin Hai, forcing Xing Feng to leave, and defeating the Time and Space Saints, he thought that no one would be able to threaten his position anymore. He never imagined that someone would still be able to take advantage of this loophole in the end. However, you are too stupid. If you had continued to cultivate in secret, perhaps you would have been able to contend against this king one day. But now, haha. A cold smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. He did not panic at the 10,000 strange weapons in front of him. Even though he sensed a hint of danger, it was far from the threat of death. As long as he paid attention, he could easily withstand this attack. If you had launched a sneak attack, you might have caused some trouble for me. But in a head-on battle, I have never been afraid of anyone. Sui-Yang Saint King's smile became brighter. At this moment, the aura of the 10,000 weapons had reached its peak. Buzz! The subtle connection between the 10,000 weapons produced a great power. Even the space trembled faintly. Although the trembling was so small that it was almost negligible, it was undeniable that the space was trembling. It should be known that the space of the barren source was extremely sturdy. Even the first 3 bolts of the terrifying lightning could not break the space. One could imagine how sturdy it was. This was definitely a terrifying move. Sui-Yang Saint King stood there with a smile on his face. However, a hint of seriousness flashed in his eyes. Such a powerful move finally made him take it seriously. If he was not careful, there might be some trouble. Within the Sword God Palace, Linfeng's pitch-black eyes, which were as deep as a black hole, flashed with a bright light. There was not the slightest expression on his face, as he calmly controlled the 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures and stood there quietly without moving. He was waiting for Sui-Yang Sage King to take the initiative to approach. Whether it was Lin Feng or Sui-Yang Sage King, neither of them wanted the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei to come. Their arrival would add a lot of uncertainty to the situation. To Lin Feng, escaping from 3 super experts was no different from ascending to the heavens. To Sui-Yang Sage King, the chances of snatching a first-rate innate spiritual treasure from the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei were similarly slim. Right now, they were competing to see who would lose their cool first and who would be more anxious. The party that lost their cool first would naturally have to bear more risk. Fine beads of cold sweat formed on his forehead. Lin Feng held his breath and stared unblinkingly at Saint King Sui-Yang. In comparison, Saint King Sui-Yang was much more relaxed, but his expression was still somewhat solemn. An invisible pressure appeared out of nowhere, causing the breathing of the two to become slightly heavy. The space fell into a dead silence. Time passed slowly. Although the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei's figures still appeared, it was certain that they were getting closer and closer. Perhaps they would appear in the next second. As expected of an expert who has secretly cultivated to the level of a top-tier titled Sage King without being detected by me. Just based on this calmness alone, I can't compare to you. Saint King Sui-Yang smiled faintly and took the initiative to break the deadlock. The invisible pressure dissipated instantly. You win. I admit that I can't wait any longer. Although he said that, there was no trace of disappointment on his face. Perhaps, in his opinion, even if he lost his cool, it would not affect the final result. At most, the process would be slightly more troublesome. It's time to act. Dense droplets of sweat soaked its fur. The extremely large three-eyed giant wolf appeared to be rather timid at this moment. The 10,000 needles beast could completely understand the three-eyed giant wolf's feelings because at this moment its tenacious heart was trembling slightly. They did not feel that their performance was bad at all because their opponent was Saint King Sui Yang, the ruler of the universe and the most powerful existence since ancient times. Even the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei were far less famous than him in terms of reputation. It was impossible not to be afraid of such an existence. Hearing Saint King Sui Yang's words, Linfeng's nerves suddenly tensed up. His entire body was covered in cold sweat as if he had just been fished out of the water. However, he was extremely calm as if he was not affected at all. Bang! A huge sonic boom was heard and the space trembled slightly. In the eyes of Linfeng and the two spirits, Saint King Sui Yang suddenly moved and turned into an afterimage, disappearing from their sight. His aura locked onto Saint King Sui Yang. Almost instinctively, Linfeng said softly, "Explode." The 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures suddenly emitted a scorching and dazzling light. They were like small suns that shone brightly and illuminated the entire world. A chilling destructive power suddenly radiated in all directions. This force was almost as powerful as the first three heavenly thunders of the weapon tribulation. In the distance, the Saint Kings and Mastiffs who were fighting for the second-tier natural spiritual treasures stopped what they were doing and turned to look in the direction of Linfeng and Saint King Sui Yang in horror. Even though they were far away, their hearts were still palpitating, and they felt chills all over their bodies. The War Saint Kings and Earth-titled Saint Kings widened their eyes in disbelief. This was because even they were frightened by that force. If they were slightly closer, they would be in danger of being killed instantly. At that moment, everyone was extremely frightened. If Sui Yang had suddenly used such a move when they were close, how many of the Saint Kings present would have been able to survive? This was a mysterious and terrifying expert. All the Saint Kings and Mastiffs stared in the direction of the Sword God's palace. They never knew when such an expert had been born in the world. Even if he was not a match for Saint King Sui Yang, Thunder Punishing Saint King, and Yuan Kuei, he was close. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were experts of the same level. Many names appeared in their minds, but they rejected them one by one. Finally, a name appeared in their minds. Lin Hai. In their opinion, if anyone had such potential, Lin Hai, who had been forced by Saint King Sui Yang to destroy his own cultivation 100 million years ago, was the most suspicious one. Could Lin Hai have escaped from the death prison? Moreover, he must have encountered a great opportunity. Everyone could not help but suspect. However, all of this was just their guesses. Whether or not it was true, they didn't dare to be sure. Linfeng, who was in the Sword God's palace, was shocked. Oh no! At the critical moment, Saint King Sui Yang had forcibly broken free from his aura and avoided the center of the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure. Linfeng's heart sank to the bottom. He was extremely vigilant as he sensed the movements around him. His face was extremely gloomy. This time, he had lost the contest. Fortunately, the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure radiated outwards with him as the center. Therefore, although Saint King Sui Yang had broken free from the aura lock and avoided the greatest damage, he did not continue to charge forward. Otherwise, he would still be hit by the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure. It was because of this that Linfeng was able to escape. If it had been a normal battle, Linfeng would have become a cold corpse long ago. Therefore, he should be grateful for the ultimate move of detonating the pseudo-spiritual treasure. This ultimate move was simply a combination of attack and defense. It was created for battle. After about 3 breaths, the power of the explosion gradually weakened. The blurry space around them also gradually became clear. They saw that as far as the eye could see, it had been razed to the ground. The lush green forest had turned into bare sand. There was a huge basin-shaped pit on the ground below the Sword God's palace. Wisps of smoke rose from the crushed sand and stones. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, it had turned into a piece of scorched earth. Not a single blade of grass had grown for thousands of years. When they saw this scene clearly, the Saint Kings and Mastiffs in the distance could not help but gasp. At the same time, Linfeng's eyes suddenly narrowed. This was because a blurry figure was slowly becoming clearer in his sight. It was Saint King Sui Yang. Saint King Sui Yang was still wearing his unique golden silk robe and a crown on his head. His stalwart body was as straight as usual. His handsome and weathered face still exuded boundless charm and majesty. The surface of his body was covered with a layer of faint golden light. It was this layer of faint golden light that had blocked the remaining power of the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure, causing him no harm at all. "You are more powerful than I thought." Saint King Sui Yang withdrew the smile on his face and said indifferently, "If I had not broken free from your aura lock at the critical moment, I am afraid that I would have been seriously injured." Although Saint King Sui Yang said it casually, a tinge of fear and seriousness flashed across his eyes. The terrifying power just now was much more powerful than he had imagined. He was sure that if he had been in the center of the explosion, he would have been seriously injured. However, he obviously had the upper hand in this battle. Although Saint King Sui Yang's aura was strong, it was still far from being able to lock him down. Based on this point alone, he was not afraid to deal with this ultimate skill. As long as he was careful and broke free from Saint King Sui Yang's aura lock in time, he would be able to avoid all injuries. Admit defeat. Hand over the first-grade innate spiritual treasure, and I will spare your life, Saint King Sui Yang said calmly as he looked at the light spot formed by the Sword God's palace. Of course, it was impossible for him to spare his life. However, if he could use this to lower Saint King Sui Yang's guard, he was certainly willing to do so. Hearing this, Linfeng's pitch-black eyes did not change at all. How could he believe the words of the enemy? Especially when the enemy was Saint King Sui Yang. "Linfeng, why don't?" Three-eyed giant wolf hesitated for a moment. "Why don't we hand over the first-grade acquired spiritual treasure? At most, I will follow you in the future. When I become a first-grade artifact spirit, my body will also evolve into a first-grade innate spiritual treasure. It may not be weaker than this first-grade acquired spiritual treasure." Shaking his head slightly, Linfeng sighed and said, "Do you really think that Saint King Sui Yang will let us go if we hand over the bright silver spear?" Sensing three-eyed giant wolf's doubtful gaze, Linfeng looked at Saint King Sui Yang. "If you think this way, it only proves that you do not know him at all." Chapter 772. If they didn't hand over the bright silver spear, Linfeng and the others might still have a chance. Once they did, they would definitely die. Linfeng remained silent in the face of Sui Yang Saint King's seemingly good suggestion. However, his actions represented his choice. The Sword God's palace was once again surrounded by 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures. They were arranged in an orderly manner in an instant. There were 55,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures in his infinite space ring. He had used up 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures in the previous move. Now, he was left with 45,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures. He wanted to use his actions to prove that he was not powerless. He hoped to use this to make Sui Yang Saint King wary. While controlling the 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures, Linfeng instructed Number 1. Number 1, control the Sword God's palace and leave this place as quickly as possible. At the same time, he released a gust of death will and secretly used it on the Sword God's palace. He pushed the Sword God's palace to the maximum speed. Swoosh! The Sword God's palace and the 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures around it flew into the distance. Do you think you can escape? Sui-Yong Saint King's face darkened. His figure flashed as he carefully chased after them. Although he was wary, Sui-Yong Saint King would not give up so easily. The first-grade innate spiritual treasure was only one of his target. The mysterious elite in the Sword God's palace was also his target. In fact, Sui-Yong Saint King valued this mysterious elite even more. He would not give up until he killed this elite. The Sword God's palace moved quickly, and the surroundings changed rapidly. Sensing that Sui-Yong Saint King was chasing after them, Lin Feng's face darkened. Sui-Yong Saint King was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. He was also more ruthless. This old man! Lin Feng cursed under his breath. A glint of viciousness flashed across his eyes. Explode! Without any warning, 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures suddenly released a terrifying power. Layers of destructive power radiated in all directions. Sui-Yong Saint King, who was chasing after him, was the first to bear the brunt. Let's go! Taking advantage of this gap, Lin Feng took over control of the Sword God's palace. He immediately drove the Sword God's palace into the distance at the fastest speed. With a flash of flowing light, the light spot formed by the Sword God palace disappeared. Sui-Yong Sage King was caught off guard by Lin Feng's attack. Although he managed to break free from Lin Feng's aura in time, he was unable to completely avoid the impact of the destructive power. Several strands of his golden silk robe were broken, and his crown was knocked askew. His long hair was scattered, and his face was covered in dust. He was in a sorry state. Although the injury was negligible to Sui-Yong Sage King, he was still enraged. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. His figure suddenly flashed and created a huge sonic boom. Even with the eyesight of many Saint Kings, Mastiffs, and titled Saint Kings and titled Mastiffs, they couldn't keep up with his speed. It's too fast. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, Sui-Yong Saint King was already 10,000 miles away in the blink of an eye. The distance between him and Lin Feng was greatly shortened. When Sui-Yong Sage King's figure completely disappeared from everyone's sight, the crowd finally calmed down and sighed with emotion. Sui-Yong Sage King was already extremely powerful. After consuming the Saint King fruit, his strength had increased by a little. However, compared to Sui-Yong Sage King, they were more surprised by the mysterious expert who had yet to show himself. Even the powerful Sui-Yong Sage King had suffered a small loss in front of this mysterious expert. One could imagine that this mysterious expert's strength was not to be underestimated. At the very least, ordinary Saint Kings, Mastiffs, and titled Saint Kings like them could only be killed by him in an instant. Could he really be Lin Hai? The War Saint King narrowed his eyes. Although he was shocked, he was not afraid. His battle intent was strong. The Earth-titled Saint King and a titled Mastiff could not help but make the same guess. The scene of the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure appeared in everyone's minds, and they could not help but fall silent. It was too similar. Before Lin Hai had become a Saint King, he had relied on this ultimate move to severely injure many perfected Mastiffs and humans. It could be said that this was Lin Hai's famous ultimate move. It was also because of this move that Lin Hai was highly valued and had become a legend. Later on, Sui-Yong Sage King did not dare to casually make a move on Lin Hai. In the end, he finally found an excuse to cripple Lin Hai. However, after Lin Hai became a Saint King, he had almost never used this move. No one knew the exact reason. The ultimate move that the mysterious expert had used was undoubtedly similar to Lin Hai's famous ultimate move. If there was a difference, perhaps the only difference was that the mysterious expert had used this move. It was more powerful and had a wider attack range. Even Sui-Yong Sage King did not dare to underestimate it. Is it really him? For a moment, everyone's hearts sank. Among them, many of them had a grim expression, and their eyes were extremely solemn. If this mysterious expert was really Lin Hai, once he escaped, the Saint Kings who had participated in the operation to kill him would be in trouble. They did not think that Lin Hai would be magnanimous enough to let them go. It can't be Lin Hai, right? A Saint King could not help but gulp as he said in a hoarse voice. His face was a little pale, and his eyes shone with a strong sense of fear. Clearly, he was one of the many Saint Kings who had participated in the operation to kill Lin Hai. Other than this Saint King, there were more than 10 Saint Kings around him, and their expressions were rather grim. Although they found it hard to believe, and were even unwilling to believe it, they were increasingly certain that this mysterious expert was most likely Lin Hai. This was because other than Lin Hai, they could not imagine who else could use this move. The people around were instantly shocked. Lin Hai is back. Lin Hai's return meant that some people were in trouble. However, when they thought that Sui-Yang Sage King had already chased after Lin Hai, the Saint Kings calmed down a little. So what if this person is really Lin Hai? If Sui-Yang Sage King wants to kill him, how can he escape? They were certain that the person who wanted to kill Lin Hai the most now was not them, but Sui-Yang Sage King. After all, Sui-Yang Sage King was the one who had done the most to force Lin Hai to destroy his own cultivation. When they thought of this, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After flying for about 100,000 miles, Lin Feng's face became increasingly gloomy. This old dog is simply haunting me. Lin Feng gritted his teeth and looked at the figure who was chasing after him. The figure was getting closer and closer to the Sword God's palace. At most, he would catch up with him in 10 breaths. There were still 35,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures left in the infinite space ring. He was not confident that he could escape from Sui-Yang Sage King with these 35,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures. Lin Feng controlled the Sword God's palace to stop. He took a deep breath and quietly waited for Sui-Yang Sage King to arrive. It was obvious that he would not be able to escape if he continued to run like this. He might as well take a gamble. Seeing that the Sword God's palace had turned into a light spot, Sui-Yang Sage King flew forward a little more and stopped. Although Sui-Yang Sage King hated this mysterious expert, he did not dare to get too close. Only God knew if this mysterious expert could use that move again. If he got too close, even if he could break free from the aura lock, he would still be severely injured. I have said that you can't escape. Sui-Yang Sage King looked ahead indifferently. I will say the same thing again. Hand over the first-class innate spiritual treasures and I will spare your life. Hearing this, Lin Feng sneered but did not reply. He knew that as soon as he spoke, Sui-Yang Sage King would recognize him. You're not talking? Sui-Yang Sage King's eyes flashed with a hint of doubt, but his voice was still indifferent. It has been so long and you still refuse to show yourself. Are you afraid of getting into trouble if your identity is exposed? Sui-Yang Sage King was even more certain of his guess when he saw that there was still no response. The murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger. Don't think that I don't know who you are just because you are hiding in the space treasure. Frowning, Lin Feng was startled. Could it be that he has discovered my identity? However, after thinking about it carefully, Lin Feng shook his head. He had not revealed any flaws throughout the entire process. It was impossible for Sui-Yang Sage King to know who he was. Then, how could Sui-Yang Sage King be so sure of his identity? Lin Hai, I didn't expect you to escape from the death prison. As he spoke, Sui-Yang Sage King sensed that the mysterious expert's aura trembled slightly. However, this made him even more certain of his guess. If the mysterious expert was not Lin Hai, why would he have such a huge reaction when he heard Lin Hai's name? Sui-Yang Sage King was sure that even if the mysterious expert was not Lin Hai, he must be closely related to Lin Hai. The coldness in his eyes grew stronger. Sui Yong Sage King was secretly shocked. Since ancient times, no one has been able to escape from the death prison. Lin Hai actually escaped. His guesses made him even more terrified. He is indeed a genius that I see as a threat. He clearly refined the Sage King frame to become a sage, but he still managed to grow to this stage. Sui Yong Sage King's murderous intent grew stronger than ever. He had never been so eager to get rid of someone because this person made him feel a huge threat. Even the Thunder Punishment Sage King did not have such a threat. In the Sword God Palace, Lin Feng was extremely shocked. He actually thinks that I am Ancestor Lin Hai? After thinking about it carefully, he understood. Since ancient times, there were only two people who knew how to detonate the pseudo-spiritual treasure. One was Ancestor Lin Hai and the other was Lin Feng. However, he had never used this move in front of a Sage King. The only person who knew how terrifying this move was, an Earth Sage King, had died at his hands. Therefore, the other Sage Kings did not know that there was another person in the world who could use this move besides Lin Hai. Not only Sui Yong Sage King, but the rest of the people also thought that he was Ancestor Lin Hai. However, this was better. Let them worry about it. Lin Feng was silent. He did not refute or agree with Sui Yong Sage King's words. He allowed Sui Yong Sage King to guess. However, Sui Yong Sage King took Lin Feng's reaction as a silent agreement. In an instant, Sui Yong Sage King's murderous intent grew stronger. Since it is you, then die. Sui Yong Sage King took a step forward, causing the space to tremble slightly. His figure flashed like a stream of light as he rushed over. Even if he was injured, he had to get rid of this potential threat. Chapter 773. People always had a bit of wishful thinking, just like a couple in love. Even if one of them had betrayed the other party might have noticed it, but as long as there was no concrete evidence, they would always try to convince themselves that everything was just their own wrong guess. Humans were always unwilling to face the cruel reality and would rather fabricate a little bit of hope to hypnotize themselves. Only by ruthlessly tearing open the scars and revealing the bloody truth would people have no choice but to face the cruel reality. This was human nature, and Lin Feng was no exception. Although he had already noticed that the probability of escaping with just 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures was close to zero, he still chose to do so. This was because he did not want to destroy the bright silver spear, a first-class acquired spiritual treasure that he had painstakingly refined, and he did not want to expose his identity. In fact, he had other options in his heart, but he had subconsciously rejected those options. Now that he was forced into a corner by Sui Yong Saint King, he had no choice but to dispel the trace of hope in his heart and completely face reality. At this point, if he still wanted to continue hiding, his chances of survival would be at the lowest. Explode. Another 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures were taken out of the remaining 35,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures. Facing Sui Yong Saint King's attack, Lin Feng had no other choice but to face it head-on. This was because compared to Sui Yong Saint King's defense, his own defense was almost negligible. Only the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures could offset the power of Sui Yong Saint King's attack. Sui Yong Saint King's eyelids suddenly twitched. He hurriedly threw a punch and quickly retreated. Although he was 100% confident that he could withstand Lin Feng's attack, he was not a masochist. If he could avoid being injured, it was better not to be injured. Boom! The earth-shattering explosion shook the surroundings slightly. This time, Lin Feng was unscathed, but Sui Yong Saint King was slightly injured. The golden silk robe on his body was torn in many places, and he was in a sorry state. After several exchanges, this was the second time Sui Yong Saint King was at a disadvantage. B*****. Sui Yong Sage King was furious. Since ancient times, He had never suffered such a great loss in a head-on battle. Even the Thunder Punishment Sage King did not overdo his image when he fought with him. However, he was at a disadvantage again and again in the hands of this mysterious master, but he could not do anything about it. If it was said that Lin Feng had caused him to lose a great deal of face, and caused him to wish for nothing more than to kill Lin Feng, then this mysterious expert in front of him undoubtedly caused him to hate him even more. Lin Feng had only damaged his reputation, but this mysterious expert in front of him could pose a threat to him. He clenched his fists and narrowed his eyes. A dangerous light flickered in his eyes. Although Sui Yang Sage King wanted to get rid of the mysterious expert before him, he was terrified by the opponent's continuous attacks and did not dare to act rashly. He didn't know how many more times this mysterious expert could use that ultimate move. If he waited for him to rush up and the other party used the same move again, then he would really go crazy. Lin Hai, if you have the guts, then fight me fair and square. What kind of hero are you to hide your head and show your tail? Sui Yang Sage King taunted. Unfortunately, Lin Feng, who was hiding in the Sword God's palace, turned a deaf ear to him and ignored him. He had already decided that when there were only 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures left, if the Thunder Punishment Sage King and the others had not arrived, then he would give Sui Yang Sage King a big surprise. He was sure that Sui Yang Sage King would be very satisfied with this surprise. Lin Feng was ready. As long as Sui Yang Sage King dared to rush over, he would dare to detonate the pseudo-spiritual treasures again. Currently, he had 25,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures left. If he detonated another 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures, it would be enough for him to prepare the surprise for Sui Yang Sage King. Of course, if he didn't have to do so, he naturally wouldn't take the initiative to do so. His current task could be described in one word: delay. He had already tried other methods, but they were obviously useless. Therefore, he could only take a step back and try his best to delay until the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei arrived. At that time, he would reveal his identity. Perhaps he would have a chance of winning over the Thunder Punishment Sage King. With the Thunder Punishment Sage King's help, his chances of survival would greatly increase. The only uncertainty was that the Thunder Punishment Sage King was too mysterious. No one knew what choice he would make. Lin Feng also wasn't sure if the Thunder Punishment Sage King would really help him. Lin Feng was not sure if he was more important in the Thunder Punishment Sage King's heart or if the first-grade innate spiritual treasure was more important. It was because of this that Lin Feng had subconsciously rejected this choice from the beginning. He didn't want others to decide his fate. However, now that he had no other choice, he could only take a gamble. However, before the Thunder Punishment Sage King arrived, he would not reveal his identity. This was because he had already offended the Sui Yang Sage King. If the Sui Yang Sage King knew that the person hiding in the dark was him, the Sui Yang Sage King would kill him at all costs, even if he had to pay the price of being seriously injured. Lin Feng did not forget how badly he had tortured the Sui Yang Sage King's avatar. He also did not forget how much the Sui Yang Sage King hated him. Buzz. 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures floated around the Sword God's palace, completely covering the light spots that it had turned into. The corners of the Sui Yang Sage King's mouth twitched when he saw the 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures that had appeared out of thin air. His face became even more gloomy. Sure enough, it was as he had guessed. This mysterious expert was actually able to use this move. Is he going to use this move forever? The Sui Yang Sage King was extremely angry. His patience was slowly wearing away. In the distance, the battle for the second-rate acquired spiritual treasure, the Wood Spiritual Orb, had ended. The final winner was the War Sage King, one of the titled Sage Kings. It could be said that some people were happy while others were sad. The War Sage King, who had obtained the wood's spiritual orb, was naturally excited. The other Sage Kings and Sage Kings were dejected. However, no matter how they felt, their attention had once again shifted to the Sui-Yang Sage King's side. Lin Feng had armed himself like a hedgehog to stall for time. If the Sui-Yang Sage King attacked forcefully, he would have to be prepared to be injured by the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasure. The gloomy Sui-Yang Sage King became more anxious as time passed. In his opinion, it was a shame that he had not taken down the mysterious expert after so long. Moreover, the battle could not be dragged on any longer. If it continued, the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei would arrive. Once the Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei arrived, there would be many more variables. The ownership of the second-rate acquired spiritual treasure would also be uncertain. Phew! The Sui-Yang Sage King took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. His gaze suddenly became fierce. Looking at the fierce gaze of the Sui-Yang Sage King, Lin Feng's eyelids twitched. He had a bad feeling. The Sui-Yang Sage King's figure suddenly flashed. Suddenly, a series of afterimages appeared in everyone's eyes. His speed was so fast that it exceeded the limits of their vision. Explode. Gritting his teeth, Lin Feng immediately detonated the pseudo-spiritual treasures. Boom, 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 boom. The 10,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures that contained enormous power suddenly exploded like burning fireworks, causing the surroundings to tremble. Crescent Moon Slash. The Sui-Yang Sage King waved a mysterious and ancient longsword that contained supreme majesty. He mobilized the power and will in his body. Through the ancient longsword, he plunged into the center of the explosion like an arrow released from a bow. With a swoosh, he forcefully cut open the powerful impact of the explosion and rushed rapidly toward the Sword God's palace. The head-on battle caused the Sui-Yang Sage King to be unable to break free from Lin Feng's aura. He could only withstand the power of the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures. As for Lin Feng, he could not escape and could only take the attack of the Sui-Yang Sage King. Fortunately, after being weakened by the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures and the defense of the Sword God's palace, the power that was transmitted to Lin Feng had been reduced by more than 10 times. Lin Feng's internal organs were hit by a powerful force. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face quickly turned pale. His body swayed and he could fall to the ground at any time. Sui-Yang Sage King was also seriously injured. However, compared to Lin Feng, he was much better. It did not affect his combat strength, nor was it a threat to his life. As expected of the master of all realms, this old dog's strength is too powerful. Quickly mobilizing the power of the laws of life, Lin Feng's heavily injured internal organs began to recover at an astonishing speed, as if they were being nourished by rain. In just a short while, Lin Feng's injuries had been completely healed. Sui-Yang Sage King sensed that Lin Feng's aura was recovering rapidly and his face changed. He is not dead yet. He had underestimated the defensive power of the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures. Compared to its destructive power, its defensive power was not weak at all. It could even be said that the defensive power of the explosion was as strong as the destructive power. Although Sui-Yang Sage King's attack was powerful, the power that was transmitted to Lin Feng was less than 10% of the power. Although this power still severely injured Lin Feng had already comprehended the law of life. As long as he was not killed instantly, he could recover quickly. Sui-Yang Sage King relied on his strong defensive power to withstand Lin Feng's attack. Lin Feng relied on the explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures to block Sui-Yang Sage King's attack. Sui-Yang Sage King wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger. On the other hand, Lin Feng's heart sank to the bottom. There were only 15,400 pseudo-spiritual treasures left. There was only one chance left to cause effective damage to Sui-Yang Sage King. Do I really have to use that move? Lin Feng was slightly unwilling. The people nearby looked in the direction of the Sword God's palace, and became even more fearful. No one had expected that the mysterious expert would be able to fight Sui Yang Sage King to this extent. Even Sui Yang Sage King's crescent moon slash could not kill the mysterious expert. This was bad news for many Sage Kings who had offended Lin Hai. Chapter 774. Looking at Sui Yang Saint King's dark expression, Lin Feng knew that he would not let the matter rest so easily. With a sigh, Lin Feng smiled bitterly and murmured, "Looks like I can only use that move." That was right. He still had one more move, and it was also the most terrifying move. Even he could not estimate the power of this move. However, although this move was powerful, it might not cause much damage to Sui Yang Saint King, because Sui Yang Saint King was not a fool. Once he was in danger, Sui Yang Saint King could forcibly break free from his aura lock. At most, he would only suffer a bit of backlash. It was far from being a threat to his life. Just as Lin Feng was about to use his ultimate move and Sui Yang Saint King was about to launch a new round of attacks, two powerful auras suddenly descended. Sensing a familiar aura, Lin Feng could not help but reveal a trace of joy. As for Sui Yang Saint King, his expression changed drastically. Thunder Punishment Yuan Kuei. That was right. After waiting for a long time, Thunder Punishment Saint King and Yuan Kuei, the leader of the Ba King clan, had both arrived. The two figures slowly descended from the sky. From this position, they could participate in the battle at any time. I've seen enough after watching you fight for so long. Next, we should also join in. Otherwise, wouldn't we be watching a first-rate innate spiritual treasure slip away from under our noses? Yuan Kuei was tall and sturdy, and he spoke in a carefree and heroic manner. After he finished speaking, he tilted his head and looked at Thunder Punishment Saint King. Thunder Punishment, what do you think? The Thunder Punishment Saint King nodded with a faint smile. That's true. Seeing the two calm and composed people, Sui Yang Saint King's expression darkened. You've been here for a long time? Sui Yang, you're very fast, but we're not slow either. Yuan Kuei smiled faintly. It's just that we saw that you were so engrossed in the battle that we didn't want to disturb you. Humph. Saint King Sui Yang snorted coldly and stopped talking. If they really fought, he was no match for Yuan Kuei. Although he was the lord of 10,000 realms, the king of Saint Kings, it was only limited to the human world and the demonic beast world. King Yu was not under his jurisdiction. Therefore, his so-called lord of 10,000 realms was somewhat exaggerated. Regardless of whether it was the Thunder Punishment Saint King or Yuan Kuei, their strength was not inferior to his. Especially Yuan Kuei, his strength was so strong that he and the Thunder Punishment Saint King together could barely suppress him. Despite knowing that Yuan Kuei was watching him make a fool of himself, Sage King Sui Yang still did not dare to pursue the matter. At least you know your place. Seeing that Sui Yang Sage King was silent, Yuan Kuei did not care. He looked in the direction of Sword God Palace and said, "Old friend, isn't it time for you to come out?" Just like Sage King Sui Yang, Yuan Kuei had also mistaken the Lin Feng in the Sword God Palace for Lin Hai. Perhaps in everyone's eyes, the mysterious master hidden in the Sword God Palace was Lin Hai. "I'm sorry, we're not old friends." Lin Feng's thin figure suddenly appeared as an indifferent voice was heard. A trace of astonishment crawled up the faces of the nearby people as they looked at the skinny and ordinary figure. Lin Feng. Could it be that the person who fought with Sage King Sui Yang was Lin Feng? Gosh, it's him. How long has it been since he became a Sage King? How dare he fight with Master Sui Yang? This boy's strength is growing too fast. No one expected that the person who fought with Sage King Sui Yang was not Lin Hai, who had lost his cultivation 100 million years ago, but Lin Feng. As expected, a look of shock appeared on everyone's faces. Taking in everyone's shock and surprise, Lin Feng smiled and said, "Don't doubt it. It's me." "It's you, kid." Yuan Kuei was also rather surprised. "I thought it was Lin Hai." Although he called Lin Hai an old friend, Lin Feng did not think that he was really friends with ancestor Lin Hai. Sage King Sui Yang's eyes narrowed as he stared at Lin Feng. He was so angry that smoke almost came out of his mouth. He had never expected that the person who fought with him would be Lin Feng. The most shocking thing was that Lin Feng, who had not been able to fight back, now had the strength to contend with him. He had thought that he was Lin Hai. It turned out that this boy had played him like a fool. If Lin Hai had not shown himself, he would have thought that he was fighting with Lin Hai. Sui Yang Saint King glared at Lin Feng, his eyes burning with anger. On the other hand, the Thunder Punishment Saint King was surprised and delighted. He said with a satisfied smile, "I have to say that your strength has exceeded my expectations. I thought that you would need a long time to grow to this level. I did not expect that you are not much weaker than me. Good, very good." He did not hide his admiration and relief. His attitude made Lin Feng secretly heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, Lin Feng was a little confused. Was Thunder Punishment Sage King really not interested in the first-rate innate spiritual treasure? Since ancient times, there had only been 2 first-rate innate spiritual treasures. Its value was immeasurable. You actually obtained the first-rate innate spiritual treasure. This is giving me a headache. Thunder Punishment Sage King glanced at Sage King Sui Yang and Yuan Kuei. However, with your current strength, you are qualified to control it, so, before Sage King Sui Yang could finish, Sage King Sui Yang said calmly, "Wait. Why? Do you have anything to add?" Thunder Punishment Sage King asked calmly. "Without our consent, you have arbitrarily divided the ownership of the first-rate innate spiritual treasure. Don't you think that's a little unreasonable?" Sage King Sui Yang's face was gloomy as his cold gaze fell on Lin Feng. "Moreover, I suspect that this boy has some relationship with Lin Hai." Upon hearing this, Lin Feng's eyelids twitched. Had he finally aroused suspicion? Everyone was shocked by Sage King Sui Yang's reminder. Both of them had the surname Lin. Both of them had amazing talent and had grown at a frightening speed. Most importantly, Lin Feng also knew Lin Hai's famous consummate skill. It was not impossible to say that he had some relationship with Lin Hai. Thunder Punishment Sage King frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Don't say that it's impossible. Even if he does have a relationship with Lin Hai, so what? Do you have to drag Lin Hai's matter to him? Don't forget how Lin Hai destroyed his own cultivation back then," Sage King Sui Yang said in a low voice. Saint King Sui Yang said gloomily, "If he really is someone from Lin Hai, how many of the Saint Kings here can escape his revenge?" After successfully arousing the killing intent of the Sage Kings, Sage King Sui Yang looked at Lin Feng coldly. "No matter what, this boy must die." Lin Feng and Thunder Punishment Sage King frowned. They had underestimated Sage King Sui Yang's determination. Yuan Kuei, on the other hand, was quietly watching this scene with interest. He had no intention of interrupting. After taking a deep breath, Thunder Punishment Sage King said calmly, "What if I insist on protecting him? Then let's fight." Without any hesitation, Sage King Sui Yang said, "If he doesn't die, I won't be at ease. The Sage Kings here won't be at ease either." "Don't force me." Thunder Punishment Sage King slowly clenched his fist. "If we fight, Yuan Kuei will be the one at an advantage." Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Yuan Kuei could not help but shrug. "Don't look at me. It's up to you whether you want to fight or not. I can't make the decision for you." A sly look flashed in his eyes and the corners of his mouth curled up. "However, Sui Yang, if you really hate this boy so much, I don't mind blocking the Thunder Punishment for you first. I'll buy you some time so that you can deal with this boy. Although humans and monster hunters are on opposite sides, we can work together on this matter. Naturally, he was very happy to get rid of a human expert. Otherwise, with Lin Feng's strength, he would be a great threat to the monster hunter tribe in the future. Lin Feng and Thunder Punishment Sage King's hearts sank. The thing that they were most worried about had finally happened. With Yuan Kuei's intervention, the situation had undoubtedly become much more troublesome. It seems like Sage King Sui Yang won't let me go no matter if my identity is exposed or not. Lin Feng sighed in his heart. He could not help but admire Sage King Sui Yang's decisiveness and dominance. He doesn't need any evidence at all. As long as he has the slightest suspicion, he will insist on getting rid of me. It was this decisiveness and dominance that allowed Sage King Sui Yang to remain unshakable until now. He would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Now, even the Thunder Punishment Sage Ruler could not protect him. Success or failure is due to my ultimate move. With a slight sigh, Lin Feng could not help but shake his head. Because I detonated the pseudo-spiritual treasure, I delayed until Thunder Punishment Sage King arrived. At the same time, because I detonated the pseudo-spiritual treasure, Sage King Sui Yang wanted to kill me. Fate was so mysterious. His gaze swept across the crowd. Sage King Sui Yang's viciousness, Thunder Punishment Sage King's helplessness, Yuan Kuei's gloating, and the other Sage King's ruthlessness. Everything was in his eyes. With a mocking smile, Lin Feng's gaze finally landed on Sage King Sui Yang. He slowly said, "Are you afraid?" Sage King Sui Yang was furious. A trace of coldness flashed across his eyes. "You are afraid of Lin Hai, of me, of the space-time saints, of all geniuses with potential, and of your position being threatened. Therefore, you can't wait to get rid of me, just like how you got rid of Lin Hai and the space-time saint. Even after Lin Hai destroyed his own cultivation, you are still afraid. You are afraid of revenge. The more domineering and powerful you act, the more cowardly and fearful you are." Lin Feng's nonchalant words were like a cruel hand that tore open Sage King Sui Yang's deepest scar and exposed the bloody and cruel reality in front of everyone. "The more you want to kill me, the more fearful you are." A trace of a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. With disdain, he continued, "You are so pitiful, shut up." Sage King Sui Yang was so angry that the muscles on his face twitched slightly. His hands trembled slightly. "I am going to kill you." Lin Feng wasn't afraid. He said, "You can only prove that you are guilty. You can't prove anything else." Sage King Sui Yang, who was burning with anger, clenched his fists and was about to attack. "Wait," Lin Feng shouted. "Why? Are you finally afraid?" Sage King Sui Yang said indifferently. "Unfortunately, it is too late now." "No." Lin Feng shook his head. A creepy smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He gave off a creepy feeling. "I am not afraid. I just want to tell you a secret." Deliberately mystifying. Sage King Sui Yang snorted coldly. "Actually..." Lin Feng looked around, and the smile on his face became brighter. "You guessed right. I am really related to Lin Hai." Under everyone's shocked gazes, Lin Feng said slowly, "Because I am Lin Hai's descendant." Chapter 775. A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. As soon as Lin Feng said those words, a commotion broke out around him. The people nearby looked at Lin Feng in shock. He is actually Lin Hai's descendant. Lin Feng and Lin Hai are both surnamed Lin and know the same ultimate move. I should have guessed it earlier. He hid it too well. It was only now that Lin Feng's identity was revealed. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Everyone looked at Lin Feng coldly. Sui Yang Sage King was also shocked. He did not expect his words to come true and reveal Lin Feng's true identity. "In that case, I can't let you live." At this moment, Sui Yang Sage King had no reason to let Lin Feng go. The Thunder Punishment Sage King and Yuan Kuei looked at Lin Feng in surprise. Although they had guessed that Lin Feng and Lin Hai were related, they did not expect Lin Feng to be Lin Hai's descendant. Yuan Kuei praised, "Good lad, no wonder you can grow so much in such a short time. You are Lin Hai's descendant." Lin Hai might not have been as strong as them back then, but they knew Lin Hai's talent very well. They were sure that as long as Lin Hai was given enough time, even if he had refined the Sage Monarch Godhead to become a Sage King, he would still have a high chance of surpassing them in the future. The Sage Monarch Godhead was an opportunity for others, but it was also a restriction. However, Lin Hai could reduce this restriction to the minimum. The Thunder Punishment Sage King, who was standing in front of Yuan Kuei, was even more determined to protect Lin Feng. No matter what, Lin Feng must not die. The Thunder Punishment Sage King's eyes flashed with determination as he slowly raised his head. The surrounding Sage Kings looked at Lin Feng with fear. If Lin Feng did not die today, many of them would not be able to sleep in the future. Yuan Kuei. Sui Yang Sage King looked at Yuan Kuei indifferently. "Do you still mean what you said just now?" Hearing this, Yuan Kuei patted the mighty armor on his body and said in a sonorous tone, "Of course." Nodding slightly, Sage King Sui Yang smiled and said, "All right then, I'll leave the lightning punishment to you." Glancing at the Thunder Punishment Sage King, Yuan Kuei smiled and said, "No problem." With just a few words, the two of them reached an agreement. Lin Feng was expressionless as he stared at Saint King Sui Yang. "I didn't want to lay all my cards on the table so early, but now that things have come to this, it seems like I have no other choice. Cut the crap. Lin Feng, if you commit suicide, this king can promise to leave your corpse intact. However, if you continue to be stubborn and resist this king to the end, this king will turn you into ashes." Sui Yang Sage King was still as domineering as ever, especially when he had the absolute advantage. "Tell me your choice." Lin Feng's gaze shifted between Yuan Kuei and Saint Ruler Sui Yang before finally stopping on Saint Ruler Sui Yang. He smiled faintly, then, "Let's fight." He also wanted to see if the surprise he had prepared for Saint Ruler Sui Yang would be able to achieve the desired effect. As soon as he said that, everyone around him held their breath. The atmosphere became tense, and a battle was about to break out. Strictly speaking, Lin Feng, the Thunder Punishment Sage King, Sui Yang Sage King, and Yuan Kuei were all top-tier Sage Kings who were superior to ordinary titled Sage Kings. Although Lin Feng's strength was weaker than the other three, there was a small gap between them. It was not an insurmountable gap. It was not too much to count Lin Feng as a top-tier Sage King. Moreover, even the weakest Lin Feng had the strength to kill everyone. Who would dare to underestimate him? The battle between the four top-tier Sage Kings was naturally very eye-catching. This was because it represented the highest level of battle in the universe. Since you want to resist this king to the end, then die. As soon as he finished speaking, Saint Ruler Sui Yang's figure suddenly flashed. He flashed past layers of afterimages, causing a deafening sonic boom. "Stop!" The Thunder Punishment Sage King's expression changed, and he wanted to stop him. "I'm sorry, but your opponent is me." A figure blocked the Thunder Punishment Sage King's path. Yuan Kuei looked at him with a smile. "Every time we fight, I feel that you are holding back. Of course, this could be my misperception. However, today I would like to see if your strength is only at this level. Come, if you defeat me, no one will stop you from saving Lin Feng." "You." The Thunder Punishment Sage King's face turned pale as he forcibly stopped himself. Without the help of the Thunder Punishment Sage King, Lin Feng was in danger. Everyone thought so, including the Thunder Punishment Sage King, Yuan Kuei, Sui Yang Sage King, and Lin Feng himself. However, just as the atmosphere became tense, a terrifying force shot out from behind Saint Ruler Sui Yang. This force was extremely powerful, and it was not any weaker than Linfeng's ultimate move. Sensing the force behind him and the force that had locked onto him, Saint Ruler Sui-Yang panicked slightly. He stopped moving toward Linfeng and moved to the right about 10 feet away. He forcefully broke free from the force that had locked onto him and narrowly avoided the sudden attack. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air rang in his ears. Saint Ruler Sui-Yang breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he turned his head and looked behind him with an ugly expression. He was furious. War. Do you want to be my enemy? The people nearby also widened their eyes as they looked at the imposing figure in disbelief. It's the War Sage King. Oh my God, does he want to participate in the battle between the top-tier Sage Kings? No, his strength is too strong. He is not weaker than Linfeng at all. Saint Ruler Miao Miao, Saint Ruler Huazhe, Saint Ruler Life, and the Earth-titled Sage King, who had arrived first, were all extremely shocked. The War Sage King, who had always been on equal footing with them, had secretly increased his strength to such a level that he was above them. This was something that they could not believe and accept. No one would have thought that the War Sage King, who was on par with Saint Ruler Miao Miao and the others, would have such terrifying strength. Everyone could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. They had thought that Linfeng was someone who had hidden his strength very well. Who would have thought that the War Sage King had hidden his strength even better than Linfeng? A trace of doubt appeared in Linfeng's eyes. He looked at the War Saint King in confusion. Why is he helping me? Strictly speaking, he and the War Sage King should be enemies. Back then, the War Sage King was the one who had forced Lin Hai to destroy his own cultivation and chase Xing Feng away. If Saint Ruler Sui-Yang was the one who had contributed the most and was the main culprit, then the War Sage King was the one who had contributed the most and was an accomplice. Saint Ruler Miao Miao, Saint Ruler Huazhe, Earth-titled Sage King, Life Sage King, and the War Sage King were 5 people. The War Sage King was the only titled Sage King who had participated in that incident 100 million years ago. Therefore, Linfeng could not understand why the War Sage King would help him. Should he not be eager to see him killed by Saint Ruler Sui-Yang? Be your enemy? A mocking smile appeared on his angular face. Haven't we always been enemies? Saint Ruler Sui-Yang frowned deeply and said with a dark expression, "What do you mean?" "Haha, Sui-Yang, you still don't recognize me?" An unfamiliar voice came from the War Saint King's mouth. His facial muscles wriggled, and his armor changed slightly. In a breath's time, he turned into another person. "So, do you recognize me now?" Seeing the War Sage King's true appearance, everyone nearby was shocked. They could see a trace of fear on their faces. "It's him. How is this possible? How can he be so powerful? Oh no, he's back." Everyone swallowed their saliva as if they had seen something inconceivable. Upon seeing this scene, Linfeng felt even more puzzled. Who exactly was this person? Why was everyone's reaction so huge? "It's you." Saint Ruler Sui-Yang's eyes widened as if he had been provoked by something. "How can your strength increase to such a level?" What was even more unacceptable was that he did not know that the War Sage King was someone else in disguise. The Sacred War King smiled. "Nothing is impossible in this world." "Impossible? Your strength is obviously not as good as mine. Why can't I sense anything strange?" Saint Ruler Sui-Yang was still in disbelief. The War Sage King sneered. "Have you forgotten? What was the name of Lin Hai's most famous move?" Saint Ruler Sui-Yang's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed, "1,000 transformations illusory breathing technique." Hearing this, Linfeng was stunned. 1,000 transformations illusory breathing technique? This move was actually created by ancestor Lin Hai. Linfeng could only sigh. Fate was too mysterious. "That's right. He taught me this move." The War Saint King smiled. Hearing the conversation between the War Sage King and Saint Ruler Suiyang, Lin Feng vaguely guessed the identity of this mysterious person in front of him. The legendary figure of the Xingfeng realm, God of War Xingfeng. Is it him? Lin Feng's heart was filled with excitement. The way he looked at the War Sage King changed instantly. He's back. At this moment, the situation had taken a shocking turn. No one would have thought that the War Sage King was actually Saint Ruler Xingfeng. Saint Ruler Xingfeng, who had completely disappeared from sight 100 million years ago. No wonder no one had seen him for so many years. No wonder Saint Ruler Suiyang had secretly sent so many people but could not find him. It turned out that he had already changed his identity and replaced the War Sage King. The most dangerous place was the safest place. Saint Ruler Xingfeng used his actions to vividly demonstrate the meaning of this sentence. Impossible. Your strength is far inferior to the War Sage King. How could you have killed him? Moreover, although Xingfeng is considered a genius, he is far inferior to Lin Hai. Lin Hai, who also refined the Sage King's spark to become a sage, could not have grown to such a level. Saint Ruler Suiyang's eyes were bloodshot. Speak. Who are you? Why are you pretending to be Xingfeng? Tisk tsk. Saint Ruler Xingfeng's eyes were mixed with a hint of pity and sympathy. He could not help but shake his head. It seems that I have overestimated your intelligence. 100 million years have already passed, but you are still in the dark. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Could it be that the incident 100 million years ago was still hiding some secrets? Chapter 776. You thought you could get rid of the threat by forcing Lin Hai to cripple his own cultivation and secretly sending people to kill me, but... Xingfeng looked at Saint King Suiyang pitifully and shook his head. Lin Hai had already seen through your trick. Everyone looked at Xingfeng in confusion. I'm sure you're all confused. Looking around with a smile, Xingfeng slowly said, Actually, Lin Hai had already guessed that you would do this long before you took action. Therefore, he secretly made a plan. Clearly, Lin Hai's plan had not only fooled Saint King Suiyang, but it had also fooled the Thunder Punishment Saint King, all the human Saint Kings, and King Hun. Also, there's one more thing you don't know. Xingfeng said indifferently, Lin Hai's strength is not as strong as it seems. His true strength is comparable to a titled Saint King. It's just that he has never shown his true strength in front of everyone. Judging from what happened later, his decision was obviously correct. Everyone held their breath. This piece of news was definitely a bombshell. Before you took action, Lin Hai used the 1,000 transformations illusory breathing technique to disguise himself as one of the War Saint King's subordinate. He ambushed the War Saint King and killed him. As for me, I refined the War Saint King's Saint King Godhead and disguised myself as the War Saint King. That way, no one would be able to see through my disguise. Xingfeng looked at everyone mockingly. Among the Saint Kings who forced Lin Hai to cripple his own cultivation, I was the War Saint King. What do you think? My disguise is not bad, right? Whoosh. This was shocking news. Saint King Suiyang had the worst expression on his face. He thought that he was unparalleled in wisdom and bravery, but he had been fooled like a monkey. With this trick, my safety is guaranteed. Moreover, in order to make the disguise more realistic, we didn't even tell Qing Mu and the others. Only Lin Hai and I know about this. This way we can prevent any accident. As if he did not see Saint King Suiyang's gloomy expression, Xingfeng continued, although Lin Hai crippled his own cultivation and was imprisoned in the death prison, as long as my safety is guaranteed, I'll be able to save him one day. This method could be called a stroke of genius. Even though many saint rulers were Lin Hai's enemies, they could not help but admire Lin Hai. It was difficult to imagine just what kind of intelligence he needed to come up with such a stunning plan. If they were only afraid of Lin Hai in the past, they now admired him. I don't care about Lin Hai's problem. I just want to know why your strength has reached such a high level. As far as I know, you became a Saint King by refining the Saint King Godhead. Under such circumstances, how did you become a top Saint King in just 100 million years? Saint King Suiyang asked hoarsely. Hearing this, Xing Feng smiled faintly. I have to thank you for that. A look of surprise flashed across Saint King Suiyang's face as he asked, What do you mean? Two life and death enemies were chatting like friends at this moment, causing everyone present to feel extremely strange. It was you who forced Lin Hai to cripple his own cultivation. Only then did Lin Hai understand the true origin of the title conferred Saint King. Xing Feng smiled faintly. Lin Hai boldly guessed that the reason why conferred Saint Kings are able to stand above other Saint Kings is because they all become Saint Kings through independent cultivation. Only such Saint Kings have unlimited potential and can break through to a higher level. He secretly transmitted this information to me, so I secretly gathered large amounts of Earth origin stones and various cultivation resources. With his disguise as a war Saint King, it was naturally easy for him to gather a shocking amount of cultivation resources. After all, the cultivation resources needed by Earth origin cultivators below the Saint King level were not that valuable in the eyes of a Saint King. Everyone could vaguely guess what happened next. However, no one expected Xing Feng to have such courage. Looking at everyone's shocked expressions, Xing Feng smiled. It seems like you all have guessed it. That's right, after I gathered enough resources, I announced that I was going into seclusion, but in reality, I crippled my own cultivation and started cultivating from scratch. With my talent and endless resources, my cultivation naturally soared. Moreover, I had already experienced all the stages of Earth origin cultivator, so I just had to walk the same path again. Naturally, it was only a matter of time before I reached the pinnacle of Earth origin stage. I'm only a step away from becoming a half-Saint King. Hearing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. On one hand, they were shocked by Xing Feng's courage. On the other hand, they were shocked by Xing Feng's talent. If it were them, even if they knew how to cultivate to conferred Saint King, no one would dare to cripple their own cultivation and start cultivating from scratch. How confident must one be to dare to put it into practice? What was more frightening was that Xing Feng actually did it. In the eyes of many Saint Kings, a mere 10,000 years was like a nap. However, Xing Feng had managed to cultivate from an ordinary person who crippled his own cultivation to the pinnacle of Earth origin stage. His aptitude shocked everyone. All this while, they had only paid attention to Lin Hai, but they had neglected the genius beside Lin Hai who was no less talented than Lin Hai. After that, I spent another 1,000,000 years to become a half-Saint King, and another 10 million years to reach the Saint King realm on my own. Xing Feng's calm gaze was mixed with a hint of pride. In 10 million years, he had cultivated from an ordinary person to a Saint King. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Their gazes toward Xing Feng were filled with reverence. This included Xing Feng's enemies. However, Suiyang Saint King was more concerned about what method Xing Feng had used to raise his cultivation to the level of a top Saint King in such a short time. He could not wait to ask, You're saying that you only used a short 90 million years to cultivate all the way to the level of a top Saint King? There was a hint of doubt in his voice. In your eyes, it might only be 90 million years, but in my eyes, it's tens of billions of years. This sentence came out of nowhere, and everyone was confused. However, Xing Feng did not say anything else. Of course, you can also think that I only used 90 million years to reach my current level of cultivation. Everyone pondered hard, but they did not understand the hidden meaning in Xing Feng's words. However, Lin Feng was not included in this. When he heard Xing Feng's words, Lin Feng trembled slightly. He understood what Xing Feng meant. 90 million years, tens of billions of years. These two numbers represented time, which meant that there was a time reversal, which was time acceleration. Xing Feng must have cultivated in a space where time acceleration was hundreds of times faster. And that space was very likely the work of their ancestor, Lin Hai. Copying the structure of space number 1 and creating a space with the same function, even if the acceleration was not as fast as space number 1, it still had a terrifying effect. Lin Hai's attainment in this area was far beyond Lin Feng's. At the very least, Lin Feng could not achieve this at the moment. Perhaps when he really broke through to become a king sage, he would also have the same ability. However, he could not do it now. Sensing that Xing Feng was secretly winking at him, Lin Feng knew that he had guessed correctly. Xing Feng sighed. His doting gaze paused on Lin Feng for a while before he continued. I originally planned to continue hiding until one day, when I was at least 50% confident that I could defeat Sui Yang, then I would reveal my identity. I did not expect to meet Lin Hai's descendant here and be forced into a corner by Sui Yang. Ahem. Lin Feng lowered his head awkwardly. If it wasn't for him, Xing Feng could have continued according to the original plan. Sooner or later, he would have the strength to stand shoulder to shoulder with Sui Yang Sage King, or even surpass him. With the talent that Xing Feng had displayed and the time acceleration space created by the old ancestor Lin Hai, Lin Feng believed that Xing Feng had the potential to achieve this. However, his appearance had disrupted the plans of their ancestor, Lin Hai and Xing Feng. His figure slowly moved towards Lin Feng. Looking at the calm and steady skinny young man, a gentle smile appeared on Xing Feng's face. Little guy, if you don't die today, don't be so reckless in the future. His tone contained the care and concern of a senior to a junior, and even a trace of doting. In the eyes of this legendary figure from 100 million years ago, Lin Feng was no different from his own junior. Seeing Lin Feng's guilty gaze, Xing Feng patted him on the shoulder and said, "You don't have to blame yourself too much. In fact, it's already very rare for you to have such strength in such a short time without the help of Lin Hai and me." He was very satisfied with Lin Feng's achievements. In fact, Lin Feng's achievements had far exceeded his expectations. He could imagine how much pain and suffering Lin Feng had gone through in the process. At the same time, he felt a little heartache. "Senior, since you're Lin Hai's descendant, don't be so distant." Waving his hand, Xing Feng smiled and said, "Moreover, we Earth Cultivation Realm cultivators don't care about age and seniority. If you don't mind, you can call me Grandpa Xing." There was a faint trace of expectation in his kind eyes. After hesitating for a while, Lin Feng called out, "Grandpa Xing, that's right." Xing Feng laughed. "Not bad, not bad." He was obviously in a good mood and couldn't hide the smile at the corner of his eyes. "Enough." A low, angry voice sounded. Sui Yang Sage King glared at the two of them. "I'm not interested in seeing you acknowledge your family here. If you want to acknowledge your family, wait until you're in hell together before you do so." "Xingfeng, I admit that I have always underestimated Lin Hai's abilities. If you had continued to hide, perhaps you would have been able to fight me one day. Unfortunately, you took the initiative to jump out and save me a lot of trouble." Sui Yang Sage King's killing intent surged as he slowly raised the majestic longsword in his hand. Today will be the anniversary of you and Lin Feng's death. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.